Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was sent to the Soul Society, joins Gotei 13. Naruto dies in his battle with Sasuke at the Valley of the End and is sent to the Soul Society where he joins the Gotei 13. 3 years later Naruto becomes the captain of the 3rd Division shortly after the Ryoka invasion before he, along with Ichigo and Rinji, is sent on a mission to the shinobi world. What will happen when Naruto ends up in Konoha? Find out here. Welcome aboard. Prologue. Valley of the End, Shinobi World. 3 years before the current time. This valley, on the border of the lands of fire and sound, was once the site of a legendary battle between Madara Uchiha and Hashirama Senju more than a century ago. The valley became a scar on the earth itself. The two shinobi that fought here forever etched into the valley by the two statues that lined the waterfall that ran through this place. It is here, in the shadow of these famed warriors, that two other shinobi were fighting in a desperate battle of their own. These two shinobi were Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha. The manipulations going on around them had poisoned Sasuke's mind as he tried to kill his best friend in order to gain the fabled Mangekyo Sharingan. Naruto, meanwhile, was desperately trying to stop Sasuke from leaving Konoha to join the vile shinobi Orochimaru, who wanted to take Sasuke's body for his own. Despite his efforts, however, Naruto was unable to convince his best friend to see error of his ways and had to use more force as their battle reached its ultimate climax. Sasuke prepared to use his curse mark-enhanced Chidori while Naruto prepared his Kyuubi-enhanced Rasengan. With their jutsus fully charged, Naruto and Sasuke at each other, their jutsus colliding before exploding, which caused severe damage to the statues of the famed founders of Konoha. Sasuke was knocked back by the explosion, snaking into the statue of Madara before falling to the ground, still alive but unconscious and critically injured. Fate was, tragically, not so kind to Naruto, who was pierced through his heart by Sasuke's Chidori and was launched into the lake below. His body further paralyzed by the electricity generated by the lighting-style jutsu. As Naruto fell further down into the depths of the lake, he could barely hear the Kyuubi's voice as he appeared before the beast's cage. "Wake up, you fool, we're dying!" The tailed beast yelled. The Kyuubi's attempt to rally his Jinchuriki was a useless gesture, however, as Naruto's were too grave for even him to heal. "You know as well as I do that we're already dead, Kyuubi," Naruto replied. Before the Kyuubi could say anything, however, Naruto said something that shocked the tailed beast. "I was hoping to do something about your hatred someday as well. I guess that's now going to be impossible, however. I'm sorry, Kyuubi, for letting you down," the dying ninja said. The Kyuubi was, naturally, stunned by this. The Kyuubi wouldn't have believed what his Jinchuriki just said except for the fact that the look in Naruto's eyes had as serious a look as they've ever been. Normally I would have accused someone who said that of lying to me. For some reason, however, I can tell that you're being honest with me. Sighs, maybe if we had lived that might have succeeded, the Kyuubi said as the darkness began to consume him and Naruto. "I wanted to ask you something, Kyuubi, and since we're dying, I might as well ask it now. Do you have a real name?" Naruto asked. This shocked the Kyuubi. No one since the time of the Sage of the Six Paths had ever thought to ask for his name. "Since you're not as bad as I thought, I guess I can tell you. My name is Kurama," he said as the last vestiges of life within him and Naruto vanished, but not before Naruto commented on the tailed beast's name. "So, your name is Kurama, huh? I think it suits you." Sighs, "Farewell, Kurama," Naruto said as he awaited the afterlife, unaware that he and Kurama would not be so easily separated. Konoha Hospital. Meanwhile, Kakashi had just brought Sasuke back from the Valley of End, having found his unconscious body. He had not found any sign of Naruto and had assumed that he would be healed by the Kyuubi and would return to Konoha within a couple of hours. As a team of medics, led by the Tsunade, were treating Sasuke for his wounds, which bordered on the mortal level, Kakashi was trying to calm down Sakura, who had arrived at the hospital upon receiving and who surprised her sensei with her reaction. She was angry, but not at Naruto. "How could you leave Naruto alone like that, Kakashi-sensei? You saw what he had to do just to stop Sasuke from leaving. He's probably badly hurt now as well," Sakura yelled. "Sasuke was the only one I found, Sakura. I wouldn't worry him, though. His wounds have always healed quickly, so he probably won't be gone for no more than a couple of hours," Kakashi reassured his squad member. What he didn't was that it actually going to take a few years before Naruto returned, and, even then, it would not last. Shortly after dying, Naruto arrived in the Soul Society where he was greeted by his Minato and Kushina, his parents, who had sensed their son's presence when they felt the power of Kurama. Naruto was surprised, though strangely relieved, to find out that Kurama was still inside him. The tailed beast was still bound to Naruto's soul. It didn't take Naruto long to make good on his promise to Kurama, earning his trust and shortly thereafter, as an unintended benefit, full access to his powers. After reuniting with the third Hokage and meeting several other shinobi, all of whom had become Shinigami, the full list of shinobi in the Gotai 13, with their respective ranks, can be seen at the end of this chapter. Naruto decided to become a Shinigami himself and entered the Shino Academy. Naruto was surprised to find out that he was considered a prodigy there, and apparently the best one the Gotai 13 have had to date. He was also surprised by, though was happy with, the fact that no one cared about his status as a Jinchuriki and, as such, did not suffer from the prejudices that he had to deal with back in Konoha. This allowed to befriend people more easily and allowed him to reach his full potential as a Shinigami. Naruto's skills and power allowed him to graduate from the academy in 1 year. Naruto joined the 13th division after he graduated, and his captain, Jushiro Yukitake, decided to make the blonde his lieutenant, making Naruto the first lieutenant of that division since the death of Kai and Shiba. This was where Naruto found himself, 18 months later, when they arrived. Chapter 1, Ryoka. 6th Division Barracks, Suriitai, Soul Society. Current time. The small prison cell in the barracks was seldom without an occupant thanks to Byakuya Kachiki's strict adherence to the law. The person imprisoned in the cell right now was a special case, however, for it was none other than Byakuya's younger sister-in-law, Rukia. The adopted member of the Kuchiki family was currently speaking to her longtime friend Rinji Abarai, who was getting annoyed with her comments about his new promotion to lieutenant of the 6th division. "Do a good job, Lieutenant." "You're very strong, Lieutenant." "You have weird eyebrows, Lieutenant," Rukia said as an irritated Rinji grabbed the bars of the cell. "That's it, damn it. Let me at her, I'm gonna," Rinji said until both he and Rukia sensed a very large, and very familiar, surge of Ryatsu emanated nearby and approached them. Rinji's face paled as he knew what was that meant. Maybe you should run, Rinji," Rukia said, knowing full well who was the source of the Ryatsu. Rinji, heeding his friend's advice, began to run towards the only door in and out of the prison room. Unfortunately for Rinji, it was too late for him to run as that door suddenly flew off its hinges and smacked the bars of the cell before it shattered into millions of pieces. Rinji flinched heavily when he heard the culprit's voice. "Tattoo brows." The voice roared as the person charged into the cell, and right at Rinji. "Please calm down, Naruto, I swear I can explain," Rinji pleaded before he was silenced by a kick to the face, courtesy of the 13th Division Lieutenant. "You went to arrest Rukia and attacked her, you think you can just explain that way?" Naruto yelled as he grabbed Rinji by his shihakusho and shook him until he was almost unconscious. Normally both he and Rinji were good friends and were basically brothers. After he was informed of Rinji's actions during Rukia's arrest, however, Naruto's temper, which, among many of Naruto's other attributes, has become legendary in the past year and a half, was unleashed. His temper did not flare up often, but when it did there was little anyone could do to stop him if no one from the shinobi world, or at least a close friend, was nearby. Thankfully, for Rinji, Rukia was there. "Please stop it, Naruto, it's not worth hurting Rinji," Rukia pleaded, getting the attention of her commanding officer, who let go of the badly bruised Rinji. Naruto ran up to her cell. "Rukia, are you hurt?" Naruto asked her with obvious concern. "I'm alright, Naruto, just a little down, that's all," Rukia said as she thought about her lieutenant's very strong protective nature. He was always like this with the members of his squad, like a shepherd to his flock. He was very concerned over the safety and well-being of the members of the 13th Division, and Rukia, knowing her lieutenant far too well, knew that even if he was, for whatever reason, transferred to another division, that sentiment would still be there. Naruto nodded, but before he said anything, however, Rinji managed to get up. "Naruto, I know you're upset, and I'm really sorry for what I did, but can you at least let me speak to Rukia in peace?" Rinji asked, to which Naruto sighed. "Fine, but the next time something like this happens again, Tattoo Brows, I swear to Kami you'll be face down on the ground eating bricks faster than you can say tailed beast," Naruto warned, still simmering from his latest outburst. "In any case, I have to report to old man Yukitake right now, so I'll come back to check on you later, Rukia," Naruto said, to which both Rukia and Rinji nodded. As Naruto left the 6th Division barracks, he couldn't help but think of his father's warning earlier in the day, when he had been running a few errands for his captain. "I didn't want to tell you this just yet, but now it seems that the time to wait has finally passed. Keep a close eye on my captain whenever you're in his presence, as I fear this is his doing," Minato warned him, though there wasn't a real need to do so. Unlike the rest of the Gotai 13, the shinobi turned Shinigami, who were known as Shinobigami by many of their colleagues, had suspected Aizen of plotting something along with Ikamaru and Tozen. They had even figured out the true nature of Aizen's Zanpakuto, a fact that earned him even less trust amongst the Shinobigami. Even the thick-headed Naruto could tell something was wrong with those three captains, Naruto's suspicions were also shared by both Kurama and his Zanpakuto, which showed just how poor a mask Aizen wore. Because of the fact that the three captains had everyone else in the Gotei 13 fooled, however, the shinobi kept their suspicions to themselves until they could prove any wrongdoing on the part of those three. As Naruto raced towards his barracks, he clenched his fist at the thought of the 5th Division captain. For your sake, Aizen, this better not have anything to do with you, Naruto thought to himself. He was unaware of the fact that, even now, the one person Aizen had the most interest in was preparing a daring operation into the heart of the Soul Society itself. 13th Division Barracks, Suriitai. More than a week later, Naruto had woken up before daybreak. As he had since the day he had visited Rukia, there was too much on his mind for him to sleep. It had already been a trying week since Rukia's arrest, as Naruto sat on the roof of this barracks to watch the sunrise. First the execution sentenced out to his friend occurred, then his subsequent argument with Byakuya nearly coming to blows, though they had both never really seen eye to eye on anything before. Byakuya had found Naruto's lack of formality and even greater lack of respect for authority figures displeasurable, while Naruto actively despised Byakuya for his poor treatment of his subordinates and, especially, for placing the law even above his own family. This gulf had only gotten worse since Rukia's arrest, with Naruto's parents, Captain Yukitake, and Shisui Uchiha being the only ones that could stop the two Shinigami from trying to kill each other. The final thing that occupied Naruto's mind was the arrival of 5 intruders to the Rokangai sector of the Soul Society, one of them being the one whom Rukia had lost her powers to, and their attempt to enter the Suriitai. He especially had mixed feelings over what to think of that guy, who Rukia kept calling Ichigo. On the one hand, this Ichigo was responsible for Rukia's predicament. On the other hand, however, he was in the Soul Society now and was, more than likely, trying to save Rukia, so Naruto assumed that he actually did care for his friends. As Naruto pondered his next course of action, he felt a familiar Ryatsu approach him. "Good morning, Shisui-sensei. How are you feeling?" Naruto asked the Uchiha who had acted as his teacher since his graduation, teaching him skills that the Shino Academy instructors could not. "I'm alright, Naruto. I was actually going to ask you the same thing. Both of your parents and Captain Yukitake are worried about you since you haven't been getting much sleep recently," Shisui said. Naruto sighed at this comment. "I've just had a lot on my mind recently, that's all," Naruto said. Shisui, thanks to his time as Naruto's master, knew which particular thought was on Naruto's mind at the moment. "You should wait until the intruders enter the Suriitai first if you plan to confront them," Shisui said. The Uchiha knew that Naruto was planning to confront these intruders, regardless of what anyone tried to do to convince him to do otherwise, as the blonde probably believed that, by confronting them, he might find an answer to a question that must have been bothering him. "I know, sensei, but I've never been the most patient guy, and every day I wait is a day closer to Rukia's," Naruto said before he and Shisui noticed that a small light appeared in the skies above the Suriitai as the sun began to rise. This light appeared to come closer and closer to the home of the Shinigami until, to the shock of both Shinobigami, the light collided with the soul shield membrane that surrounded the Suriitai. The small light was held back by the membrane for a few moments until, to the further shock of Naruto and the rest of the Shinigami, the light broke through the barrier and, after a minute or so, split into 4 streaks which began to descend to the city below. Everyone in the Suriitai already knew what this meant even before the barrier was breached. Before Shisui realized it, Naruto was already heading towards the nearest light, which he assumed to be one of the intruders. "It looks like they've finally arrived. It's time to see what kind of person you truly are, Ichigo Kurosaki," Naruto thought as he entered the nearest sewer entrance. Having learned the layout of the underground network a few months prior, in order to approach the intruders without being detected. Underground sewer system, Suriitai. Several hours later. The massive underground network was barely used as its layout was known to a handful of Shinigami, most of them from the 4th Division. One of these people, a young man named Hanataro Yamada, was currently navigating the system. What made this foray stand out, however, were the 2 intruders, who are called Ryoka by most of the other Shinigami, who were following him. One of these intruders, a guy with short orange hair and wearing a Soul Reaper Shihakusho, walked to Hanataro's side. "Hey, Hanataro, can I ask you something?" he asked. Hanataro got a little anxious before he nodded in reply. "When you talked about how there aren't many other Shinigami that knew their way around these sewers, you looked like you were going to add something to what you were saying before I interrupted you. Could you tell me what you were going to say?" he asked. "Well, there have been stories over the past few months, Ichigo. Apparently, some of the other members of the 4th Division claim that they have seen another Shinigami walking through the sewers. They claim that the person is not of the 4th division though. As of right now, none of them have been able to get a good look at the person to positively identify, Hanataro explained, as both Ichigo and the other intruder, a man from the Rukongai region named Genji Shiba, secretly hoped that this person was either a tall tale or, if they were real, that they would not be in the sewer right now. This would, apparently, not be the case. Why don't we change that, then, since I'm here now, a voice from the darkness said, causing Ichigo and the others to stop in their tracks. Ichigo gripped Zangetsu as he responded to the voice, prepared to fight whoever this opponent might be. Who the hell are you? Ichigo asked as Zangetsu was unsheathed. Ichigo looked at the path in front of him since the voice appeared to come from that direction. Hanataro, having recognized the voice, suddenly paled as he had a good idea of why that person was there. It can't be, you're the one who's been using the sewer passages? Hanataro asked in horror, to which the person responded to the affirmative. Ichigo, his patience growing thin, had had enough of this person's mind games. Show yourself, damn it! Ichigo commanded, to which the person sighed. You don't have to tell me that, I was going to do that anyways, the person said. The person soon stood before the 3 would-be rescuers, their appearance made visible to them by the fluorescent light bulbs that provided dim lighting to the underground network. It was a guy about Ichigo's age, though a little shorter than he was, with short and spiky blonde hair and blue eyes. He wore a standard shihakusho with an orange sash wrapped around his waist, an armband that had a badge of some sort around his left sleeve, and a black headband, with a metal plate emblazoned with the kanji for shinobi sewn onto it, wrapped around his forehead. He had his zanpakuto, which was a katana with an orange hilt and a red spiral-patterned tsuba, sheathed and secured to his sash. The first thing that caught Ichigo's mind as being unusual, however, were the 6 marks on Guy's face, 3 on each cheek, that resembled whiskers. They made him look like some sort of fox. The second, and more important, thing that made this guy stand out from the other Shinigami Ichigo had encountered until then was the massive amount of Ryatsu that emanated from him, as it was greater than anything Ichigo had ever felt in his short time as a Shinigami. Ichigo prepared for what he thought would be the most difficult battle he had fought until then as the mystery guy turned his gaze towards him. Who are you? Ichigo asked. The guy pointed his right thumb as his headband as he answered. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, lieutenant of the 13th Division, he declared, shocking both Ganju and Ichigo. How the hell can a lieutenant have so much Ryatsu? I had a feeling that the lieutenants were no pushover, but this is ridiculous, Ganju said. It was a sentiment that was also shared by Ichigo, as the orange-haired Shinigami had fought a lieutenant, in this case Renji Apparai, before, and even he, with his crappy senses, could tell that guy before him now was on another level, another planet even, by comparison. If this guy's power was far greater than another lieutenant, then why was he at the same rank? Because all the spots for captain are already taken, plus I haven't achieved one of the major requirements yet. That's enough about me, though, Naruto said as he focused his stare at Ichigo again. Are you Ichigo Kurosaki? The one that Rukia talked about? He asked, surprising Ichigo, who took a while before he made a response. I guess I am, what's it to you? Ichigo asked, to which Naruto sighed. Why are you here? Is it perhaps to save her? Naruto asked, giving the impression that he ignored Ichigo's question. Yes, I am, and I just asked you, why does it matter to you? Ichigo asked with the irritation he felt clearly evident in his voice. It matters to me because Rukia and I are in the same division, Yubaka, Naruto replied, stunning Ichigo with his statement. Before Ichigo could say anything, however, Naruto continued to speak. Based on what Rukia told me, I have a feeling that you and I are alike in many ways. Size, unlike you, however, I still don't know what to do about her execution. That's why I'm going to put you to the test, to see if you're truly strong enough to save her. I think that if I do that, then I can answer that question, Naruto said. Ganju, at this point, went up to Ichigo, who was standing a few yards away from Naruto. He could be setting a trap for us, Ichigo. How can we be sure he ain't lying? The Shiba clansman said before Ichigo cut him off. I can already tell you that he isn't lying to us, Ganju. If he had wanted to defeat us, he could have done it the moment he spotted us. Even I could tell that the difference in our powers is just too great. If he wanted to simply end our rescue, he could have knocked us out before we knew what happened. He's pretty good at concealing his Ryatsu. Instead, he confronted us head-on, so I'm willing to take a leap of faith here, Ichigo said before he turned his attention to Naruto. What's this little test you have in mind? He asked the lieutenant, who flashed a smirk. It's nothing too complicated, all you have to do is fight me. You don't have to beat, though, all you have to do is wound me once. It doesn't even have to be a serious wound, though we'll not be using what powers we need in order to win. If you can do that, then you've passed. Any questions? Naruto explained as he unsheathed his Zanpakuto. What are we waiting for? Let's do this, Naruto Uzumaki. Ichigo said as both he and Naruto charged at each other. It wasn't long before their blades to collide with each other, signifying that the two Shinigami had begun their battle. Chapter 2, Finding an Answer, Naruto vs Ichigo. Underground Sewer System, Suriitai, Soul Society. Current time. As Naruto and Ichigo clashed in the sewers below the Suriitai, both Ganju and Hanataro watched with the shock they were feeling clearly etched into their faces. Ganju was shocked at seeing this display of power on Naruto's part. Even though it was clear that the blonde-haired Shinigami was using less than a quarter of his strength, he was clearly getting the better of his opponent, who looked like he had been run over by a freight train, while Naruto had yet to receive even a single wound. Hanataro, on the other hand, was amazed by the fact that Naruto had not taken Ichigo down after 20 minutes had passed. Hanataro had witnessed what the former shinobi was capable of with using that level of strength when Naruto protected him from a couple of 11th Division members who had been bullying him around. The amount of strength Naruto was fighting at right now was at the level of a captain, so the fact that Ichigo was still able to fight him was nothing short of a miracle. Naruto was also impressed by Ichigo's strength, even as he had forced the orange-haired Shinigami on the defensive. With the exception of his fellow Shinobigami and the captains that he fought when they tried to gauge his strength, everyone else would have lost a fight against him in the first few minutes. Ichigo has not only managed to keep fighting him, the would-be rescuer had even managed to tire Naruto out considerably, as he had been forced to use both his Shuinpa and Kido against Ichigo. Ichigo suddenly swung Zangetsu as Naruto's chest before the blonde could continue his attack. As Naruto shunpoed yet again, he took a moment to note Ichigo's massive amount of Ryatsu before he pointed his right index finger at Ichigo. Heido number 4. Byakurai, pale lightning, Naruto said. He generated a concentrated lightning bolt that he then discharged at Ichigo. The orange-haired managed to dodge the attack as Naruto suddenly appeared above him. You're not bad, Ichigo, but you're going to have to try harder than that, Naruto said rather bluntly as he swung his Zanpakuto at Ichigo's head. I'm not finished just yet, Naruto Uzumaki, so don't act as if I am already beaten. You may be much stronger than I am, but I won't give up. I have to rescue Rukia, and if that means passing this little test of yours, then I will do it, Ichigo said in response to Naruto's comment. Naruto already knew that Ichigo was not finished, but was trying to push the human to see just how much strength he had. After blocking Naruto's slash, Ichigo, to the former shinobi's surprise, stopped moving and had placed his Zanpakuto on his shoulders. Naruto wasn't the only one that was confused by Ichigo's actions, as both Hanataro and Ganju were also taken aback by this. What the hell is Ichigo doing? Ganju thought to himself as Ichigo just stood in that position, unmoving. Are you okay, Ichigo? Hanataro said as a sudden and massive burst of Ryatsu emanated throughout the area. Since the underground sewers were so deep below the surface that only those in the passages would have felt this upsurge in power. Naruto looked on as Ichigo suddenly turned his glare towards him. The former shinobi's eyes widened as Ichigo's eyes suddenly glowed a light blue. I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but I know it's time to show you my resolve, Naruto Uzumaki, Ichigo said as Naruto looked at him in shock before he flashes a smirk. Resolve, huh? So, it is your will that has helped you through all this, Naruto thought to himself as he prepared to dodge the oncoming attack. The Shinobigami was surprised when Ichigo lifted his massive blade. With the blade pointed towards the ceiling, it looked as if he intended to slash at Naruto despite the fact that he was 20 feet from the blonde. Ichigo then swung his Zanpakuto, which, to Naruto's surprise, unleashed some sort of massive beam of Ryatsu as it was swung. Before anyone realized it, the beam reached Naruto, who suddenly vanished behind the light generated by Ichigo's attack. After a few moments, the attack finally dissipated, leaving baying a column of smoke and a canyon-like chasm on the floor of the hallway. Ichigo looked on as his breathing became slow and heavy. Did I get him that time? Ichigo asked himself as he fell to his knees, his exhaustion and wounds having finally caught up to him. Though Ichigo assumed that Naruto did survive the attack, he wasn't sure if Naruto was able to fully escape the onslaught. As the column of smoke continued to dissipate at a slow pace, Ichigo and his two companions suddenly heard Naruto say something that shocked all three of them. You something else, Ichigo, you know that? You actually managed to wound me, Naruto said as the smoke finally cleared enough for the three would-be rescuers to see what had happened. Ichigo and Ganju couldn't believe what they were seeing. Naruto stood before them as if he was still unscathed. It was hard to tell, however, as the Shinobigami's entire body was now enveloped by what appeared to be a Ryatsu shroud that was in the form of flickering yellow flames. Naruto now wore what appeared to be a necklace made of Magatama beads, while an image of a larger Magatama appeared on the shroud where it enveloped Naruto's abdomen. The round circle of larger bead-like image was itself strange as it looked like a spiral pattern of some sort. In addition to the shroud, Naruto's hair was now spiked up with the two endmost locks now resembling horns. As final change in his appearance, Naruto's eyes had changed colorado, turning from blue to orange. The change in appearance was accompanied by an increase in Ryatsu that only Ichigo could withstand without being pinned down to the floor, though he had already fallen to his knees prior to this form. /N, Naruto just used his Nine Tails, Kyuubi, Chakra Mode, KCM. Ichigo was shocked, but, surprisingly, it wasn't from either the changes in Naruto's appearance or power. Why are you still unscathed? I thought you said that I wounded you, Ichigo said, to which Naruto sighed. You did wound me, Baka. If I hadn't unleashed this form when I did, that wound would have actually been fatal, Naruto explained away. Naruto then, to everyone's shock, dispersed the form that he had taken, which undid both the increase in his powers and the change in appearance. When the KCM dispersed, Ichigo, Ganju, and especially Hanataro, were surprised to see that Naruto had indeed been wounded. The blonde-haired Shinigami had what was clearly a slash wound that reached his left shoulder to what appeared to be inches above where his heart and major blood vessels. Ichigo realized what that wound meant if his smirk was anything to go by. I guess I passed your little test, Naruto, Ichigo said as his two companions got back to their feet. So, you did, Ichigo, Naruto said as he motioned for Hanataro to heal the orange-haired Shinigami. As Hanataro began to heal a reluctant Kurosaki, he turned his gaze to Naruto's wound. Naruto noticed Yamada's concerned expression and waved it off. You don't have to worry about me, Hanataro. You should already know that this wound will probably be healed in a few minutes anyways, so focus your attention to Ichigo, Naruto reasoned. The former shinobi then turned his attention to both Ganju and the somehow conscious Ichigo when he saw that both had expressions on their faces that screamed confusion. I guess this would be the best time for an explanation about who I am and what I'm going to do now. Am I right? Naruto asked. He sighed when the two men nodded as he realized that this would take a while. 2 hours later, Naruto had finished his explanation to Ichigo and Ganju a few minutes prior and was now headed towards the sewer entrance that was located right next to the barracks of his division. After getting the group to agree to not talk about anything that he said to them after he parted from them, Naruto told them about himself, including a little bit about his past life, since all of the Shinobigami did remember their past, and about the existence of the Shinobigami. The former shinobi then agreed to let Ichigo and his friends continue their efforts to rescue Rukia. Naruto, thanks to his battle with Kurosaki, even agreed to help the intruders with the rescue. Due to the suspicious nature of Rukia's execution, however, Naruto told the group that he would not join the group as it would be better if he got the other Shinobigami to help them as well. Though Ichigo was suspicious of Naruto's claim, he finally relented after a few minutes. After taking a few more minutes to explain he planned to do to the group, Naruto left, having agreed to meet with Ichigo and his friends, including those that were not present, once Rukia had been rescued. Naruto, despite being aware of the possible manipulations surrounding Rukia's sentence, decided not to tell Ichigo of these dark designs just yet as he had no solid proof of them. Naruto decided to ask his dad to hold a meeting with the other Shinobigami to inform them of the situation and to plan their course of action. Naruto didn't have to worry about the possibility of any of them refusing to help since they had been planning to deal with this situation anyways, though the group of former shinobi had yet to decide if they would have to forcibly stop the execution. As Naruto finally reached the ladder leading to the sewer entrance, he reflected on what had happened in these hallways today. He was especially reflected on his opponent, a thought that was not lost on the part of his inner entities. It's just like Rukia said, Naruto, he is a lot like you, a familiar voice said to him from within his mind. I guess he is, Kurama, though I'm shocked that his powers are still growing even now. To think that he's already at the level that he is makes me wonder if he even knows how much potential, Naruto replied. Says the kid who is already at the level where he can obtain Bankai yet refuses to do so, another voice said in a mocking tone. This caused a giant vein to suddenly poke out of Naruto's forehead. Are you seriously going to bring that up? I thought that we agreed to honor my dad's request to wait for that until us Shinobigami have dealt with that Sonk Aizen and his two lackeys, Naruto said in an irritated tone before he heard that same voice sigh at what he said. We did agree to that, Naruto. But let's imagine for a moment that Aizen is the one responsible for this entire ordeal and that he finally makes his move against the Soul Society. Even though you're able to see past his illusions, your sure Kai isn't going to be enough to deal with him. If you really want to save Rukia, you're going to have to make that decision. And it has to be made now, Naruto, the voice said. Just as Naruto was about to sigh at this lecture, Kurama stepped in. This guy may get on my nerves every time we have a conversation, Naruto, but he does have a point, the tailed beast said in agreement. You've always known how to push my buttons, don't you? Kamikaze, translation, divine wind? I guess I shouldn't be surprised since you are my Zanpakuto. Sighs, you do realize that I already know all of this, right? Because I know all of that already, I was going to tell you as well as Kurama that I plan to finally begin my Bankai training after I have this meeting with the others, Naruto said. Both of his internal resident was surprised by this but were unable to say anything before Naruto continued to speak. I promised my dad that I would wait a bit before I began that training. If Aizen is the one who's responsible for Rukia's sentence, however, I can't afford to wait any longer. I'm going to need that power to deal with that man, so I'm going to ask Shirsue-sensei to help me with my training, which I plan to begin tonight. As for my dad, as long as it actually helps us in stopping Aizen, what he doesn't know won't hurt him, right? Naruto explained. The former shinobi could tell that Kamikaze was smirking after hearing all of this as he began to climb the ladder out of the sewers. Chapter 3, Preparations. Lieutenant's Assembly Room, Suriitai, Soul Society. 4 hours later. Naruto was losing his patience as he waited, alongside the other lieutenants, for the officer of the 4th Division that was supposed to deliver the latest update on the situation with Ichigo and the other intruders 2 hours ago. After getting out of the underground sewers, Naruto first headed to his room in the 13th Division to change into another Shihakusho so as to not arouse suspicions with the tier that his earlier uniform now sported. After changing and placing his Zanpakuto in his room, he went to find his father. He managed to find his dad at the 5th Division barracks and managed to get him to hold a meeting with the other Shinobigami, before either Naruto or Minato could even look for the others. However, a Hell Butterfly came with orders for all lieutenants to head to their assembly area to receive the latest report on the Ryoka invasion. Naruto and his dad had arrived at the meeting room first, with Haku, Fugaku, and Hiruzen arriving shortly afterwards. Minato managed to inform the three of Naruto's encounter with Ichigo and of the meeting they would hold before all of the other lieutenants, minus Yuichiro Kusajishi of the 11th Division, arrived. As the lieutenants now waited for the report to arrive, Naruto was talking with Felrinji as well as Ranjiku Matsumoto, the lieutenant of the 10th Division. I guess I can't say I'm surprised, this Ichigo guy sounds way too much like myself and my predecessor Kaion, after all, Naruto said, making sure that he acted as though he had yet to meet Kurosaki. Ranji had just told Naruto of the conversation he had with Rukia as he escorted her to the Senzakyu. The part where Rukia reacted to the knowledge that Ichigo was still alive was the part that Naruto was responding to. That may be true, Naruto, but I doubt he has as much skill as either of you, Ranjiku said. I wouldn't be too sure of that, Lieutenant Matsumoto, another voice said in response. The three lieutenants turned around and were surprised to see that it was Fugaku that had replied. These intruders were able to defeat Jidanbo, survived an encounter with Captain Ikamaru and were able to breach the soul shield membrane. We have to assume that they're all very strong and very dangerous if they have already caused this much trouble, the former head of the Uchiha clan explained without revealing everything else that he now knew, surprising both Ranji and Matsumoto. Do you really think the Ryoka are that much of a threat? Ranjiku asked, to which Fugaku nodded. Of course, I'm sure that the officer from the 4th Division will now prove my point, Fugaku said, as if on cue. A man suddenly appeared at the door of the assembly room. Third seat of the 4th Division, Yasachika Imura, reporting, the man said. Before he could say anything else, however, Naruto made his presence known to the third seat in 2 sentences. You're late. You better have a good reason for that, or you can kiss your sorry ass goodbye. Naruto roared in a clearly irritated tone as Rinji attempted to hold him back. The former shinobi already had too little time to waste on these reports, and this officer had made it even worse. Imura's face paled as he tried not to provoke the lieutenant, accidentally or otherwise, any further. The third seat hadn't seen the Uzumaki lose his temper personally but had heard enough of the stories to know that he didn't want to get on Naruto's bad side, assuming he wasn't already there, that is. My apologies, Lieutenant Uzumaki, I was delayed due to some last-minute updates of great importance, Imura explained. Naruto, having calmed down thanks to Rinji's intervention, raised an eyebrow upon hearing the last part of the third-seated officer's explanation. What could be so damned important that could have forced us to wait 2 hours more than we were supposed to? Naruto thought to himself. He would get his answer soon enough as Imura immediately began reading the report that was in his hands. 5 minutes later. The preliminary reports appear to suggest that the entire 11th Division, with the exceptions of Captain Kenpachi Zaraki, Lieutenant Yuichiro Kusajishi, and the 4th-seated officers Abusa Momochi, was completely wiped out, Ayamura said as he briefed the lieutenants on the part of the report regarding the events that had occurred today. As of right now, the first few minutes of the report were little more than summary of what had happened to this morning, which, needless to say, annoyed several of the officers. The mood changed, however, when Ayamura briefed the lieutenants on the defeats of the 3rd-seated officer Ikaku Madarame and the 5th-seated officer Yumichika Ayasegawa, both of whom were from the 11th Division. The fact that 2 high-ranked officers were defeated by Ryoka was already a big shock. But an entire division being beaten? The reactions of some of the lieutenants to this bit news were not very surprising. That's impossible. Izuru Kira, the lieutenant of the 3rd Division, said. The 11th Division is gone? Renji asked in shock. The rage that he was suddenly feeling was understandable due to the fact that Ichigo was among the intruders and his close relations with his former division. How were these Ryoka able to do so much damage in just a few hours? Chojiro Sasakaibe, the 1st Division lieutenant, blurted out. The Shinobigami, while also feeling very bad for all the members 11th Division who were now casualties, thought of the defeat of the division in a more critical light compared to their fellow lieutenants. Even if they didn't say those thoughts out loud, they charged headfirst into battle against an enemy without knowing who they were dealing with. What did they expect would happen? Fugaku asked rhetorically to himself. The 11th Division is even more poorly disciplined than I imagined. I guess this also proves that Naruto was right about Kurosaki, though, Minato thought to himself. Master Zabuza always said that the members of his division were all talk, minus Captain Zaraki, Haku thought as he shook his head. He remembered that Zabuza had told him of his rather poor opinion of his own division. Honestly, did they really want to start a war that badly? Was the thought on Hiruzen's mind at that moment. And people call me an idiot. I almost feel sorry for Zabuza since he has to deal with those dumbass every day, Naruto thought as he sighed. After shaking off these thoughts, they then continued listening to the report. As Ayamura finished his report, the lieutenants went back to their respective barracks. Shinobigami meeting place, undisclosed location within the Suriitii. Sometime in the evening. This secret chamber was a modest room by most standards. It was basically a semi-spherical interior with a 2-story high ceiling which was solid bedrock and a small stone urn in the center in which a fire been burning. Inside this room Naruto and the other 8 former shinobi stood in a circle. They had already finished discussing what had happened between Naruto and the intruders earlier that day as well as the plan of action they would now take. So that's the plan, any questions? Naruto asked. As this meeting was his idea, he was basically the one would be in charge of what the Shinobigami planned to do now. When no one answered, Minato decided to ask his son an important question of his own to ending the meeting so that they could all prepare for what they planned. Naruto, were you able to retrieve it? Minato asked. It was a pain to go through with it and I'm sure Rukia is going to kill me when she finds out, but that creep Mayuri was able to help me obtain it. I made sure that he wouldn't say anything about what happened until this is all over. I'll give it to old man Yama at that point, Naruto said, getting a nod from his father. I guess that's it, then, Minato said, ending the meeting. With that everyone began to head towards the exit, except Naruto. Wait, Shisui-sensei, can I ask you something before you go? Naruto asked. Shisui stopped in his tracks as Naruto waited for everyone to leave before he finally asked his mentor if he could help him with his Bankai training. Shisui was taken by surprise at this sudden turnaround. Though Naruto had been more than capable of learning Bankai for quite some time, he had not even attempted it due to his father's request to wait, which Naruto had honored until that time. Are you sure want to do that, Naruto? I'm sure Minato is going to protest, Shisui said before Naruto interrupted him. Then I won't tell Dad that I'm trying to obtain my Bankai. You know that we're going to have use everything we have to stop that damned Aizen. You said that you discovered a secret training area near Sokayaku Hill so we can use that place to train, Naruto said. Shisui sighed at this. The Uchiha guessed that, with Rukia now an unwilling pawn in Aizen's schemes, Naruto was now taking this matter very seriously and was not going to take no for an answer if he felt that this was something he had to do. I guess I can help you since it appears that you're not going to take no for an answer. Understand, however, that I'm only. You do remember what my explanation about how one obtains his or her Bankai, right? Shisui reminded him, to which Naruto nodded. Very well, then, I guess I'll help you out. We should wait until tomorrow, however, as you still have that lieutenant's meeting in the morning, Shisui pointed out. Naruto groaned at remembering that, though his sensei was right in telling him to wait for that meeting, since there wouldn't be any more meetings, he was still getting tired of them. With all these useless meetings, I'm amazed that everyone else is surprised that Ichigo and his friends have evaded capture, Naruto thought to himself as he and his sensei left the meeting chamber for the night. Secret training area, Sokayaka Hill. The next day at noon. I can't believe a place this big has been hidden from everyone else right below the execution grounds. I wonder what would go out of there, Naruto said, rather amazed at the size of the place. I sometimes wonder about the same thing, though I guess that's a moot point, Shisui said, getting a nod from his longtime student. In any case, we need to get started, since that Snake Aizen is probably going to make his move at any moment, Naruto said. He, like the rest of the former shinobi, knew that they were running out of time to stop Aizen's plans. The night and morning after the meeting had brought even more chaos to the Siriidii. There were many things that had happened in that time. Rinji's defeat to Ichigo and the authorization for the use of one's Zanpakuto made the tension in the Siriidii increase to unbearable levels. Then there was the Aizen's murder, which only made the anxiety in the air worse for every, while most of the other Shinigami were simply devastated by the loss of Aizen. Especially the 5th Division 4th seated officer, Momo Hinamori, the former shinobi, knew that this meant that Aizen had begun to make his move. Realizing that it wouldn't be long before they had to confront Aizen, his subordinates, Naruto immediately excused himself from the growing commotion at the scene of Aizen's murder and went to find Shisui. After Naruto informed the Uchiha what had happened, they both headed to the secret training room, flash stepping as quickly as that they could make sure that no one was following them. Naruto shook off these thoughts before Shisui gave him one final warning. Before we begin, Naruto, I want that you understand this very well. Even though we still have 8 days until Rukia's execution, there's still a chance that Aizen might try to push up the date much sooner than that. So, to be safe, I'm going to give you until this midnight to subjugate your Zanpakuto second longer. If you can't do it by that time, you'll just have to confront without a Bankai, Shisui said, making sure that his student understood what he said word for word. Naruto simply smirked in response to his sensei's warning. Then I'll just have to obtain my Bankai before then, Naruto replied confidently. Though he was rather surprised at how little time he would be given, Naruto knew that he was already pushing his and Rukia's luck enough as it is by taking this time to train, so he would just have to work with what time he had. Very well, then, start by activating your Shurikai, Shisui said as he set a timer for midnight. Naruto nodded before he unsheathed his blade. Open the floodgates, Kamikaze, Naruto said as he threw his Zanpakuto into the air, the tip of the pointed towards the ceiling. The blade then stopped midair as a small cloud suddenly formed above it. The cloud began growing in size and darkness until, after a few seconds, the cloud turned into a small thunderstorm a couple 100 yards wide. The moment the cloud reached this size, a very powerful lightning bolt struck Naruto's blade, which was still hovering in the air. After the flash of light dissipated, the blade fell into Naruto's grasp, revealing Kamikaze's Shurikai form. The blade was now a lightning bolt that had been compressed into the shape of a Chikuto sword, a /N, the type of sword that Sasuke wields in Naruto Shippuden, which was releasing small gusts of wind as Naruto held the blade. A small yellow tag was now attached to the base of the hilt with the kanjis for lightning, water, and wind written on it. Now what, Shisui-sensei? Naruto asked as he attempted to contain the sporadic release of wind from his blade. Have the spirit of Kamikaze materialize. I'll use my Ryatsu to help maintain it long enough for you to try to subjugate him, Shisui explained. Since Naruto could only keep the spirit of Kamikaze materialized for a few hours without aid, due to the fact that he had only learned to do so very recently, Shisui would keep the Zanpakuto spirit materialized until his student achieved Bankai, or until midnight arrived, whichever one came first. Naruto, without saying another word, focused his Ryatsu into his blade, which in turn generated more light until an explosion of lighting radiated across the training grounds. Had anyone been standing on the hill above the secret room, they would have felt a slight tremor caused by the powerful shockwave generated by the explosion. Thankfully for both Shinobigami, no one was close enough to Sokayaku Hill notice anything out of the ordinary. As the light generated by the blast dissipated along the temporary loss of hearing caused by the subsequent thunderclap, both Naruto and Shisui could hear another person, presumably a male, from the sound of his voice, called out to them. Took you long enough to finally do that, don't you think? Lil Naruto? The voice said in a clearly mocking tone. Chapter 4, Preparations complete, the Shinobigami move out. Secret training area, Sokayaka Hill. Recap. As the light generated by the blast dissipated along with the temporary loss of hearing caused by the subsequent thunderclap went away, both Naruto and Shisui could hear another person, presumably a male, from the sound of his voice, call out to them. Took you long enough to finally do that, don't you think? Lil Naruto? The voice said in a clearly mocking tone. Current time. A giant vein popped out of Naruto's forehead when he heard his Zanpakuto's nickname for him. For once in your miserable life, Kamikaze, would you stop calling me that stupid nickname? Naruto said with great irritation as the spirit of Kamikaze became visible through the dissipating cloud of dust. It was a man who appeared to be in his late teens who was around 6 feet tall with a lean build. He had spiky black hair that went well below his waist and was tied into a ponytail, as well as blood-red eyes with black slits due to the partial influence of Kurama's power. Kamikaze wore what could only be described as a coat of lighting shaped into the form of the samurai-like armor that was once used by many shinobi before the founding of the shinobi villages. Along with this armor, the Zanpakuto wore a black undershirt with sleeves that reached below his elbows, black pants that went to the middle of his shins, black shinobi sandals, a blood-red shinobi headband that had metal plate with the stylized leaf symbol of Konoha emblazoned on the metal, and a red sash tied around his waist. He held a blade in his right hand that was basically the pure lighting Chikuto that Naruto would wield when using his Shurikai, except this one was a few inches shorter than that version, and instead of a tag attached to the bottom of the hilt, a thin rope made out of pure lighting was attached. The rope connected the sword to Kamikaze's sash and, with the rope being made of lightning, it could expand to whatever length the Zanpakuto spirit desired. As Naruto fumed at Kamikaze's insult, the Zanpakuto simply flashed a smile at his partner's irritation. But I like calling you that. It lets me push your buttons all the more easily, Lil Naruto, Kamikaze said in response to the lieutenant's annoyance. Naruto, not surprisingly, got even more steamed at his Zanpakuto's mannerisms. Unlike the Zanpakuto spirits of some of Shinigami, the other Kamikaze didn't have any issues with Naruto, or even Kurama for that matter. But the Zanpakuto did enjoy annoying the hell out of both the Biju and his Jinchuriki just to get an amusing reaction from the two. Shisui decided to refocus Naruto's attention on the task at hand before the Uzumaki tried to kill his own Zanpakuto and end his life as a Shinigami in the process. Enough of this nonsense, the both of you, Shisui demanded, getting the attention of both Naruto and Kamikaze before turning his attention to the Zanpakuto. Now then, Kamikaze, based on your little conversation with Naruto, it's obvious that you already know why you're here and that you've overheard what has been said, so I won't ask. Once I stabilize your materialization, I assume that you can begin right away? Shisui asked the manifested Zanpakuto. Yep, was the only reply Kamikaze gave. As soon as the Zanpakuto said that, Shisui shunpoed in front of the Zanpakuto and placed his hand on the manifested spirit's chest and began to channel some of his Ryatsu into him until, after a minute or two, the Uchiha managed to completely stabilize the manifestation of the Zanpakuto. Once Shisui finished, the manifested Kamikaze placed his left palm into the ground, which apparently caused hundreds of blades, in the form of the spirit's Shurikai, to emerge. All of these blades were stuck in the ground in a vertical position as Kamikaze picked one of them up as the blade and the rope it was attached to had suddenly vanished. Now then, Naruto, your challenge is very simple. One of these blades is the true me and is the only one that can defeat me. You have to find it before I can kill you, since I'll attacking you the whole time entire. Or before your time runs out, and defeat me with it. Oh, and every time you pick up the wrong blade, there's a nasty surprise that'll await you, Kamikaze explained. The last part of the Zanpakuto's explanation made Naruto shudder, as his Zanpakuto had a slightly dark sense of humor and he wasn't very shy about it. Naruto reached for the closest blade to him with a great deal of anxiety, and for good reason, because the moment he made contact with the blade's hilt he was zapped, but goodbye said blade before it disappeared. After a couple of seconds Naruto regained feeling in his right hand, at which point he turned to glare at the smiling Kamikaze. You are a cruel man, you know that? Naruto asked rhetorically. Now, Lil Naruto, being a critic isn't going to help you get Bankai any sooner, Kamikaze said, which provoked his wielder even further. After Naruto attempted to grab another blade, and getting zapped as a result, he turned to face his Zanpakuto just as he dodged his Zanpakuto's first attack. When I get my hands on the true you, you're so dead, Kamikaze, Naruto declared as he continued his efforts to find the true Kamikaze. /N, I'm going to skip this fight since it would take too long for me to write, especially due to the nature of this chapter. Almost 6 hours later. Which he managed to do, over 4 hours after the training had begun. It had not been an easy task, of course, and the fact that he had to find the correct blade while the manifested Kamikaze was continuously attacking him made the task more daunting. Eventually, however, Naruto found the blade that was the true form of Kamikaze and, after fighting the manifested Zanpakuto spirit for another grueling hour, the Uzumaki managed to defeat Kamikaze using a combination of swordsmanship, a combination various Kido spells, and the nine-tailed chakra mode to finally subjugate Kamikaze and obtain his Bankai. After Kamikaze took half an hour to explain the nature of his Bankai to Naruto, the Shinobigami finally undid his Zanpakuto's manifestation. With another 2 hours before the next scheduled lieutenant's meeting, he used the special hot spring located within the training area to heal himself since the training he'd just undergone left him too seriously injured for even Kurama to heal his wounds quickly without any aid. As Naruto quickly got himself dressed in another shihakusho, he turned to Shisui, who had just woken up from a short nap he had taken while waiting for his student. "Did you sense those approaching Ryuatsus, sensei?" Naruto asked, to which the Uchiha nodded. "Yeah, and they're clearly not a member of the Gotei 13 whom I'm aware of. Based on the huge amounts of Ryatsu, these two must be with the intruders," Shisui reasoned. Naruto smirked at this. "Oh, they definitely are, Shisui-sensei. After all, I fought one of those two intruders earlier," Naruto said just as the sources of the Ryatsu appeared. One of them was a dark-skinned woman who was a little over 5 feet tall with a slender figure, golden-colored eyes that were cat-like in appearance, and long purple hair that she kept in a ponytail. She wore an orange shirt, under which she wore what appeared to be a black undershirt, black stretch pants, light brown shoes and a pale brown sash that she wore around her waist. The woman was not the one who had Naruto's attention, however. It was the other person who the woman was carrying on her shoulder, an unconscious and badly injured Ichigo. While Naruto stood there, looking at Ichigo's condition in shock, Shisui focused his attention on the woman. "You must be one of the intruders, correct?" the Uchiha asked, to which the woman nodded in reply. Shisui raised an eyebrow at this. "Why did you come to this place if there are two potential enemies already here? With your level of power, I'm sure you would have detected us," he asked with curiosity. Even though Shisui could tell that this woman was easily at the level of a captain based on her Ryatsu, despite her efforts to hide it, the Uchiha thought that this woman would not come here when there were two potential threats in the area. While Shisui, Naruto, and the other Shinobigami intended to help with Rukia's rescue, there was no way she could have known about that, or so Shisui thought. The woman simply smirked. "Considering the fact that you two haven't attacked me yet, I'm pretty sure that's not the case, especially since you Shinobigami planned to rescue Rukia as well." Naruto Uzumaki and Shisui Uchiha, the women rhetorically asked in a teasing tone. Both Shisui and Naruto couldn't believe what this woman just said. She not only knew their names, she also knew about their group's plan. Naruto did what most Shinigami would have probably expected the Uzumaki to do in that situation. He unleashed a massive barrage of questions upon the mysterious woman. "How did you know who we are and what we're planning? Who the hell are you? Why are you here? What are doing carrying Ichigo on your shoulder? And why does he look like he got into a fight with the eye-patch psycho?" Naruto asked. /N, if you can't figure it out, that's the nickname Naruto uses to refer to Kenpachi Saraki, unaware of just how on the mark he actually was. Shisui's eyes widened upon hearing his student's last question, but for a very different reason than one might expect. So that boy she's carrying on her shoulder is Ichigo Kurosaki. No wonder Naruto took an interest in him. With all that Ryatsu that he has, it's amazing that he's just a human, the Uchiha thought to himself as the women simply smiked at Naruto's questioning. "Well, it'll take a while to explain it all to you, so I'll start off with an introduction. My name is Yoruchi Shihoin," the now named Yoruchi said. Shinobigami meeting place. The following night, Naruto was in the hideout with the rest of the former shinobi discussing the furthering of their plans to save Rukia recent and to stop Aizen, as well as the recent turn of events. Needless to say, it was a very long turn. The first, and the most important, was Naruto and Shisui's talk with the intruder named Yoruchi, who explained the situation regarding Ichigo and 13 the other intruders. Ichigo had tried to break Rukia out of the Senzakyu, but Yoruchi was forced to render him unconscious and bring him to the secret training ground after Byakuya and Yukitake arrived at the holding cell. Yoruchi then told the two former shinobi that she intended to train Ichigo in order to have him obtain his own Bankai in order to save Rukia. Neither shinobi really questioned the possibility, since the orange-haired Shinigami had the necessary Ryatsu to achieve that level. Though she left a few of Naruto's questions unanswered, they really didn't have that time to receive the answers for them due to the lieutenant's meeting due to begin an hour from then. The three Shinigami decided to simply focus on their individual rescue efforts for the time being. After exiting the training area, Naruto made a beeline to the lieutenant's meeting, which he got to with 10 minutes to spare. After the meeting, which was late at night, Naruto and the other Shinobigami headed to their secret meeting place. "Does everyone know what to do?" Naruto asked, referring to the various jobs that he and the other former shinobi were going to do as part of their plans to save Rukia. The others nodded in response. Despite having to adjust their plans to the situation, the changes weren't very drastic, so they were implemented very quickly. Naruto sighed in relief at this since he really didn't have time for setbacks. The fact that Rukia's execution had been moved to the following and the fact that the young lieutenant had to juggle around with 3 different rescue attempts, the Shinobigami, the intruders, and both captains Yukitake and Kairaku were all trying to save Rukia's life, meant that he had little time for setbacks. Alright, then, let's get some rest. The fight begins tomorrow, Naruto declared. As the former shinobi dispersed, he realized that tomorrow was going to be a very long day. Chapter 5, The Forestalled Ambition. Sokayako Hill, Suriitai, Soul Society. Current time. Yamamoto Genryosai stared at Rukia as she stood on top of the platform, all tied up for her execution. Release the Sokayaku, he ordered. Yes, sir. The Kido Corps surrounded the Sokayaku and clasped their hands together in a form of a hand seal. The ropes that were attached to the poles on the ground slowly began to come apart, eventually snapping. They began to circle the Sokayaku lazily, growing faster with each passing second until the ropes bounding the halberd unwound and sped towards the ground, stabbing into it. Rukia stared up at the Sokayaku as she thought back to when she and Jin had their little exchange at the bridge. Even though Ikemaru troubled my heart at that moment, little by little, my peace is returning. But is this because of the Captain Commander's promise? Or perhaps it's because when Nisama saw me disturbed, clinging shamefully to life, he shut me out without even a hint of doubt. Thank you so much, Nisama, said Rukia quietly as 3 cubes surfaced from the platform. The rope bounding Rukia's hands together suddenly faded away, and the 3 cubed placed themselves in front of Rukia's hands and feet. Rukia started to float up to the scaffold, and the halberd suddenly erupted into flames, a pillar of fire surrounding it and dissipating to reveal a gigantic phoenix at least 2 to 3 times the size of the colossal scaffold. Kiko, said the Captain Commander as he stared up at the majestic phoenix. The true form of the Sokayaku blade, and the final enforcer of the death penalty. Once he pierces the criminal, the death penalty will be over. As the captains and the other bystanders stood in awe of Kikoo, Rukia's eyes grew wide as she saw the phoenix. The majestic Sokayaku reared its neck and screeched, spreading out its wings as it prepared to charge. Rukia bowed her head as it sped at her, finally at peace. Meanwhile, Captain, aren't you finished yet? Naruto pranced around. He said this, getting more and more impatient by the minute. Yukitake frowned at this. Patience, Naruto. These kinds of things take time. He suddenly clapped his hands together a few seconds later as a cloud of smoke seeped out behind the closed doors. It's finally finished. Naruto clenched his hands into a tight fist and rushed out the door. I'm going on ahead, he yelled as he sped towards Sokayaku Hill. I'll save Rukia, so get over to Sokayaku Hill with the shield as soon as possible. And Naruto, Yukitake called out as he rushed to open the sealed artifact. Wait for me. Sokayaku Hill, Suriitai, Soul Society. Meanwhile, Rukia opened her eyes, confused by the fact that she hadn't been pierced by the Sokayaku yet. What's going on here? Are you alright, Rukia? Her eyes widened as she recognized the voice. She slowly lifted her head to see an orange-haired figure standing in front of her, amazingly blocking the gigantic phoenix with his Zanpakuto using just one hand. Ichigo. Is that you, Ichigo? Ichigo looked back and grinned at Rukia. Yeah, it's me. I've come to save you, Rukia, he said coolly. Rukia's lips started to tremble, and she bowed her head, tears welling up in her eyes. Why, you idiot? I told you not to rescue me. Ichigo looked confused. Rukia's head shot up, and Ichigo raised an eyebrow as she scowled at him comically. You idiot! I told you not to come and rescue me. Why did you come to rescue me? Oi! Raged Ichigo. What do you mean, why did you come to rescue me? You're supposed to thank me, you idiot. Rukia stuck out her bottom lip as she turned her head away. Humph. I never asked you to. Ichigo scowled at her. Why, you little dash? Ichigo. Rukia. Ichigo and Rukia looked down to see Naruto speeding towards them as he waved at them. Oi, Naruto! Yelled Ichigo as he waved back at him using his free hand. It's about time you came. Naruto activated Kurama's shroud and used his chakra arms to hoist himself up on the scaffold, releasing the mode right after. What took you so long? Asked Ichigo. I was with old man Yukitake, Naruto responded. He looked around the area, a frustrated look on his face. Just where is he? Whoa! Naruto head snapped around as he was Ichigo stumble, the Sokayaku withdrawing for a second strike. Watch out, Ichigo! Warned Naruto. That thing has been said to power of 1,000,000 Zanpakutos. You won't survive the next attack. Ichigo grimaced as he glared at the phoenix, a determined look on his face. Shay! This is nothing. I got this, Naruto. Suifeng narrowed her eyes as she stared at Ichigo. Who is that guy? The Sokayaku was said to contain the offensive and defensive abilities of 1,000,000 Zanpakutos, and yet this kid was able to hold it back, with just one hand? What kind of power is this? Her eyes suddenly widened in shock as a velvet-colored rope wrapped itself around the charging phoenix's neck, halting its attack. The golden pole attached to the end of the rope slammed into the ground, holding the phoenix in place. Yukitake Jushiro, said Suifeng to herself. Shunsui suddenly appeared in front of the pole, placing his hand on it to stabilize it. Yo, Yukitake. You sure like to make people wait, don't ya? I'm sorry, replied Yukitake as he glanced over at Shunsui. The release took me a while, but now we're good to go. Suifeng clenched her teeth in frustration as she recognized the crest on the shield. That's the Shihoin clan seal. Shunsui and Yukitake both drew their Zanpakutos and slammed the blade into the shield, activating it. The velvet-colored rope that was binding the Sokayaku began to glow, and the flame quickly traveled up the rope towards the trapped phoenix. Boom! The Sokayaku exploded as the Shihoin shield activated, and large chunks of fire rained down on the people below. Impossible! Thought Suifeng to herself as she shielded her face with her arms. Ichigo performed a backflip and landed on the scaffold. Rukia looked up at him. Wait, Ichigo. What are you doing? Just shut up and watch, said Ichigo as he grabbed the piece of cloth that was attached to Zangetsu. He threw his Zanpakuto up into the air and started to twirl it in the air. He suddenly yanked at the cloth and grabbed the hilt of the oversized katana, holding it blade down. His eyes flared as it turned clear blue, and a massive burst of Ryatsu enveloped Ichigo, powering him up. He slammed the point of Zangetsu into the scaffold, and it began to glow blue. Thud! A giant of dust enveloped the whole entire area as the scaffold exploded. It slowly dissipated to reveal the main part of the scaffold completely destroyed. You never shut up about how I shouldn't rescue you and how I should just go home. I told you, didn't I? Your opinions are just gonna keep getting ignored, said Ichigo as he held Rukia. Rukia gave Ichigo a sad smile. Yeah. Isen looked up at the scaffold, a look of disbelief on her face. Impossible. The Sokayaku stand is. Oi, Ichigo. Ichigo looked ahead to see Rinji drop the unconscious body of a Kido Corps member on the ground, his Zanpakuto in his hand. What? Rukia stared at him, her eyes wide. A huge smile slowly spread across her face. Rinji. Thank goodness you're alive, Rinji. Alright, said Ichigo lazily. He slowly lifted Rukia into the air and glanced over at Rinji. Get ready, Rinji. Ha! Rukia looked up Ichigo. Wait, Ichigo. What are you going to do? Rinji's face turned blue as he realized what Ichigo was going to do. Wait, hey! You aren't planning to take her! Yelled Ichigo as he threw Rukia at Rinji like a football. Aha! Screamed Rukia as she flew towards Rinji. Why you baka? Screamed Rinji as she crashed into him. Oi, you dumbass! Scolded Naruto as he smacked Ichigo across the head. What the hell was that for? Ichigo rubbed the back of his head as he pouted. Well, I just thought that it was a cool thing to do at the moment. You idiot! Naruto repeated. You're just lucky she wasn't hurt, or I'd beat the crap out of you. He shook his head and pulled a paper bomb out of his uniform. Get ready, he said, throwing the paper bomb on the broken scaffold. In various locations throughout Siriidii, Kushina, Makoto, and Fugaku all looked up at Sokayaku Hill as they saw a mini-explosion. Upon seeing the signal, they of them all simultaneously grabbed a smoke bomb from underneath their uniforms and threw them on the ground, after which they flash-stepped towards the hill where Naruto was at. The Shinigami that was spread throughout Siriidii looked at the 4 giant pillars of smoke that rose up from 4 various locations, all of them confused as to what they were.
"Let's go and check it out,"
said a random Shinigami, calling out to his comrades as he rushed towards a random pillar of smoke.
"With Naruto and Ichigo."
"They're gone," Ichigo stated as he watched Rinji run through the area with Rukia in his arms.
"Yeah."
Naruto looked down and saw Hiruzen and Haku amidst the crowd of witnesses that were gathered on the hill. Naruto suddenly seemed to disappear as he flashes stepped to their side.
"Hey, Gigi, Haku, Naruto-san!" exclaimed Haku. "WH-?
There's no time," said Naruto, shaking his head.
"I need you and Gigi to go after Rinji and Rukia and make sure that they're okay." Hiruzen nodded.
"Got it," he replied before the Flash stepped away with Haku followed him closely behind. Suifeng narrowed her eyes as she glared at her Vice-Captain Flash stepping away.
"Haku, you traitor! I'll make sure to destroy you with my own 2 dash. Thud." "What?" exclaimed Suifeng as she went speeding past the other Shinigamis and off the cliff. "Who are you, you?"
The unknown figure remained silent as she continued to hold tight onto her. Suifeng narrowed her eyes as she grabbed the assailant's arm.
"I asked you who you were," she roared as she threw her over her shoulders.
The figure suddenly disappeared and reappeared behind a surprised Suifeng, kicking her in the back and sending her flying into a tree. Suifeng balanced herself in midair and grabbed a branch of the tree, flipping over and landing on the branch safely. She narrowed her eyes as she stared at the figure. There's only one person in all of Soul Society that could move that fast.
"Shihoin. Yoruchi,"
spat Suifeng as she glared at the figure.
It looks like you recognized me, Suifeng."
"I see," said Suifeng as she gave Yoruchi. "Just because you've been gone a long time doesn't necessarily mean that you've raised your skills." Yoruchi removed her mask and smiled at her. "It looks like your skills have dulled quite a bit, on the other hand." "Don't be so full of yourself," said Suifeng, a tone of danger in her voice.
"When will you stop thinking that you're so better than us? Both the secret mobile core and the correction core are under my control now." Yoruchi's eyes grew wide as Suifeng drew her Zanpakuto. "Your days are numbered,"
stated Suifeng as she slammed the point of her katana into the tree.
"Shihoin Yoruchi."
Yoruchi blinked as 20 members of the secret mobile corps suddenly surrounded her.
"Now, let's see. Back in Sokayaku Hill."
Shunsui tipped his hat as he grinned.
"Well," he said as he grabbed Yukitake by the hem of his captain's uniform. "I guess that it's time to disappear, huh?" Yukitake's eyes grew wide. Wait, what? "Let's go!"
exclaimed Shunsui as he sped towards the edge of the cliff, dragging his fellow captain along with him. Yamamoto Genryosai watched as they jumped off of the cliff, his face unreadable.
"Lieutenant Abarai, please stop!"
called out Isane as she and Sasakaibe Chojiro ran after him. Rinji, however, ignored her and kept on moving forward.
"Whoa!"
Isane and Chojiro stopped as they felt something in front of them, and Rinji looked back and grinned. Ichigo suddenly appeared in front of them, his cloak flapping behind him. Naruto appeared by his side, his Zanpakuto in his hand. "I'm afraid that I can't let you 2 passes," stated Ichigo as he stared hard at them.
"Run, Itegumo, Frozen Cloud!"
Isane cried out as she unsheathed her Zanpakuto. Her katana began to glow, and the blade slowly turned much thinner as 2 smaller and thinner blades protruded from either side of the hilt at a 45-degree angle.
"Pierce, Ganryamaru, stir inspirert," said Chojiro as he raised his Zanpakuto up to his face.
The blade began to glow, and it slowly thinned out into a rapier-like sword.
"What?"
Isane watched as Ichigo slammed the point of his Zanpakuto into the ground and quickly dispatched Chojiro with a simple uppercut to the jaw.
Impossible. He managed to defeat Lieutenant Sasakaibe without even using his Zanpakuto?
Ichigo turned to Isane and flickered to her side, kneeing her in the stomach before she could even react.
Ugh!
Isane fell on the ground, and she stared up at Ichigo before she blacked out.
He's way too strong for us. Just who was he?
Ichigo felt something speeding towards him and grabbed his Zanpakuto, swiftly turning around to meet Kochiki Byakuya's charge head-on, their Zanpakutos clashing together as Ichigo glared at him, his eyes narrowed.
"I can see you, Kochiki Byakuya," said Ichigo calmly. Byakuya simply blinked, his face immobile. "Kurosaki Ichigo, do not be so arrogant. Just because you were barely able to match my speed does not mean that you are a match for me. Naruto glanced at the two unconscious vice-captains and nodded. Well, I'm off then, Ichigo. Ichigo looked surprised. What? You're going, Naruto? Naruto grinned at him. I trust you, Ichigo. You can defeat Byakuya. Ichigo's eyes widened in shock as Naruto said this. I'm going to stop this madness once and for all, said Naruto as he turned around to leave. You take care of things here, Ichigo. Ichigo smiled as he bent his head. You got it. He lifted his head to lock eyes with the captain of the 6th Division. I'll definitely beat him. Naruto stayed still for a brief second before sighing. Let's finish this, he said, and with that, he disappeared. Naruto flew past a column of buildings, quickly spinning around on his feet and flash-stepping past a giant wall and speeding towards the Central 46 compound as fast as he could. I sure that you were right about me having the fastest flash step in all of Soul Society, Dad. If what I'm worried about is right, I'm gonna need it. Meanwhile, let's move. Zabuza, Yachiiro, Chad, Ishida, Oraheim, and Ganju ran past a group of Shinigamis as Zabuza and Yachiiro led the group to Sokayaku Hill. Wait, stop! Ordered Zabuza as he skidded to a halt. What is it, Zabuza-san? Asked Oraheim. Zabuza looked down at the ground. I want you guys to stay here. He glanced back at the tiny pink-haired vice-captain who was staring up at him. Yachiiro Fukutechu, please stay here with the others. I'll go up to Sokayaku Hill myself and get rid of any threats myself. Yachiiro gave the 4th seat a huge smile. Sure thing, Momo-chan. Oraheim and the others snickered at this. Momo-chan, snickered Ishida. He quickly fell silent and straightened up as Zabuza glared at him. Just kidding, Zabuza-san. Zabuza sighed at this before turning to Yachiiro. I'm off. Oraheim and the others excluding Yachiiro of course eyes widened in surprise as Zabuza suddenly disappeared using flash step. So fast. Stuttered Oraheim. Central 46 compound, Suriitii, Soul Society. Meanwhile, Minato and Shisui flash stepped to the front of the Central 46 compound, looking around to see if there was anyone around. Well, the outside's empty, observed Shisui. He turned around to look at Minato. What now, Minato-san? There's no time to waste, said Minato as he ran towards the door. I have a bad feeling about something. Catch up when you can. And with that, he disappeared. A few minutes later, Hinamori threw herself into her captain's arms, tears leaking out of her eyes as she looked up at him. Captain Aizen. Her lips started to tremble as she looked down, and she started to sob, unable to help herself. Aizen gave Hinamori a genuine smile as she sobbed into his arms. There, Hinamori. Everything will be fine. See Captain Aizen. Sobbed Hinamori. I am so glad that you're okay. Busy crying, she didn't notice her captain pulled his Zanpakuto out of its sheath. Farewell, Hinamori, whispered Aizen, his blade speeding towards Hinamori's heart. What? Aizen's eyes grew wide as Minato suddenly appeared in front of him, blocking his sword with his own. Minato, said Aizen, his usual fake smile on his face. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, Aizen, Minato responded, his eyes narrowed. You tried to kill your 4th seat? I was trying to save her from the agony of having to live without me, stated Aizen, spreading his arms out wide. It's my way of helping her out. What else would you have me do, Minato? Wait, said Hinamori as she stared up at Aizen, her eyes wide. What's going on here, Captain Aizen? Nothing, Hinamori. Minato looked down at her and gave her a gently look. It's nothing that you need to worry about just yet. Hinamori looked at him. A lieutenant and Namikaze? Sleep, whispered Minato, tapping Hinamori's head gently with his fingers. Her eyes started to droop, and she fell down into a kneeling position, her eyes fluttering close. Aizen. Very impressive, Minato, said Aizen. Even without an incantation, Minato gently placed the unconscious Hinamori on the floor and looked up at Aizen. Minato. Minato and Aizen looked around to see Shisui, Hitsugaya Toshiro, and his vice-captain Matsumoto Ranjaku crashing through the door. Hitsugaya Taishu! Exclaimed Minato. Lieutenant Namikaze.
Hitsugaya looked at Aizen, and then at the sleeping Hinamori on the floor.
Momo. Just what the hell's going on here?
Do not worry, Captain Hitsugaya. I just put her to sleep for a while, explained Minato as he kept his eyes on Aizen. I just caught Aizen trying to stab her in the heart, and I was barely able to stop him.
Aizen.
Hitsugaya glared at him, his eyes turning icy blue.
I'll kill you for T-.
No, Captain Hitsugaya, said Minato, holding his arm out in front of the captain of the 10th Division.
Please take Hinamori and get out of here. Like hell we will. Hitsugaya glared at Minato.
I don't exactly know what's going on here, but please.
Hitsugaya's eyes grew wide for a brief second before softening.
Captain, let's leave this to them, said Ranjiku softly, putting her hand on his shoulders.
We should get Hinamori out of here.
Hitsugaya closed his eyes.
Lieutenant Namikaze. I'm counting on you. Minato nodded. Understood.
Now please, leave this to me and Shursui. His eyes suddenly grew hard as he looked down at the floor.
We'll take Aizen once and for all. Hitsugaya nodded and scooped Hinamori into his arms, Flash stepping away with Ranjiku. As soon as they disappeared, Minato and Shursui turned to face Aizen.
Why are you willing to confront your own captain so easily, Minato? Don't you feel any regret or guilt for what you're about to do?
Minato stared at his captain, his gaze unwavering.
I've never trusted you, even when I first met you, I knew that there was something off about you. I also knew that you were aware of my suspicions about you this whole time, so don't try and play any games with me. I was always ready to fight you if the time ever came. I had always hoped that I was wrong, but it seems that my suspicions were correct.
Aizen smiled at this. I see. We will defeat you, Aizen Sasuke, said Minato, a determined look on his face.
He turned to Shursui and nodded, and Shursui slowly drew his Zanpakuto from its sheath.
You got that right, said Shursui. Minato and Shursui both pointed their Zanpakutos at Aizen, calling out their respective Shurikai commands.
Flash, Hiraishin, Thunder God.
Protect from the shadows, Karusa no Hansha, Reflection of the Crow. Chapter 6, The Forestalled Ambition Part 2, Central 46 Compound, Suriitii, Soul Society.
Flash, Hiraishin, Thunder God.
Protect from the shadows, Karusa no Hansha, Reflection of the Crow. As Minato and Shursui's Zanpakutos began to glow, Minato's began to shrink down in size dramatically, the middle of the katana splitting into two.
Once the Zanpakuto finished transforming, Minato was seen holding two kunais that were similar to the Hiraishin kunais that he had used in the ninja world, but the blades on these were much more edged and defined, giving it an almost strange trident-like appearance.
A yellow-white current of electricity ran through both blades.
The kunai had white metallic blades, and the handles were made of some kind of sleek blackwood with the kanji for thunder written vertically on the handles in white. Shursui's Zanpakuto, however, stayed the same in size. Instead of the shape of the blade gained a clear transparent polish that gave it the appearance of a mirror. The tsuba remained the same shape as well, but it seemed to house what seemed to be a crow's eye in the center of the tsuba, although Aizen couldn't tell as it closed right on materialization. The hilt turned into a midnight blue color, and at the end of the pommel was a couple of crow's feathers that was somehow attached to it. Aizen's eyes widened slightly as he was Shursui's Zanpakuto in Shurikai form. I must say that I'm surprised to see your Zanpakuto's true form, Shursui-san, he said with a slight chuckle.
I thought that you hadn't shown it to anyone, and yet here it is.
Minato, who had been staring silently at the floor, slowly lifted his eyes to stare at Aizen, slowly lifting his right kunai as well and pointing it at Aizen.
Sosuke Aizen. I'm afraid that we have to take you out right here and now.
Aizen smiled as he spread his arms out wide as if he was embracing Minato's threat. I'm afraid that it might not be as easy as you two might think it is, Minato, but feel free to try nonetheless.
Let's end this,
shouted Shursui as he charged at him, Minato following closely behind.
Wait, Shursui,
ordered Minato as he skidded to a halt. He grabbed Shursui's shoulder and motioned to the door.
Don't you hear anything outside?
Shursui narrowed his eyes as he concentrated on the outside of the building.
It sounds like there's some fighting going on outside, but
Minato and Shursui ducked as a figure came flying through the door, his sword barely missing the tips of their heads by a millimeter. Aizen glanced sideways at the figure as she landed by his side.
Oh, so you're here.
Minato glanced at the figure as he straightened up, his eyes narrowing as he saw him.
Jin Ikamaru, said Minato slowly. So, another traitor appears, stated Shisui as he stared at Jin calmly. It seems that we were right about you after all. You were with Aizen this whole time, weren't you?
Jin tilted his head to the side as he stared at Minato and Shisui with his snake-like stare. I have no idea what you're talking about, Shisui-san, he said, his seemingly permanent grin plastered on his face. I was just strolling through Siriidii when I heard some shouting coming from this direction, so I thought that I'd come by and see what's up.
Jin Ikimaru, growled Minato. You were always the suspicious one, even more than Aizen, I might add. I'm not surprised at all. Jin, what happened? Asked Aizen, his eyes still focused on Minato and Shisui.
Jin's grin grew even bigger. He's gotten even stronger, Captain Aizen, he said in his usual mocking tone.
Seems like we need to watch ourselves around him, am I right? Thud.
The area near the door exploded as Naruto came speeding into the building, his shuriken activated and cloaked in Kurama's shroud. And speak of the devil, said Jin as he stared at Naruto. Minato glanced at his son before turning his gaze back to Aizen.
As late as always, huh, Naruto?
Naruto maintained a cool look as he glanced at his father. Captain Yukite took too long releasing the Shihoin shield, he stated casually.
It wasn't my fault, you know. Anyways, no one's hurt or killed, so no worries.
He turned his gaze to Aizen, the traitorous captain, staring calmly at him.
Now, Aizen.
Naruto clenched his free hand into a fist as he glared at him.
Just what are you after?
Aizen smiled at Naruto and whispered something as he sheathed his Zanpakuto, surprising everyone in the room with the exception of Jin.
What do I want, Uzumaki-kun? That's a very good question indeed. Just what do I want? Money? Power? Maybe all of Soul Society perhaps? Stop playing games and answer me. Demanded Naruto.
Aizen chuckled softly.
Very well. What I want is Rukia Kuchiki. Naruto's eyes widened in shock. Our Rukia. Just what the hell are you talking about? If you wanted her so badly, you would have gone after her when she was about to be executed.
Aizen closed his eyes and shook his head.
You're not understanding my point here, Uzumaki-kun.
You and your former shinobi have constantly hindered my plans for quite some time. After I dispose of you and your tiresome comrades, my plan is to acquire a certain item which was placed inside of your friend Rukia Kuchiki's soul. I plan to take back what belongs to me, and after that, I will dispose of the pawn. Naruto growled at this, with my own two hands.
Naruto looked at the floor, his face unreadable. What, did you call her? He blinked. Tell me, Aizen. What did you just call Rukia? Aizen smiled at this. I called her a pawn. Is there a problem?
Naruto bared his teeth as he looked up at Aizen, his eyes wide and full of malice.
Never call her that again.
I'll freaking kill you. Aizen's smile grew even bigger as he stared at Naruto, looking like he was enjoying tormenting him.
Well, I wonder how you'll manage to do that, Uzumaki-kun.
Naruto closed his eyes as he began to feel his rage surge up from inside of him.
I'll do it. I'll freaking dash. Naruto. A replica of Konoha, Naruto's mind. Naruto's eyes flew open as he heard Kamikaze's voice. He looked around to find himself inside of his mind once more, which was basically an exact replica of Konoha, he himself being on the top of the Hokage's monument. Konoha was surrounded by a gigantic unmoving hurricane-like storm, and the storm had blocked out the earth as well as the sky. The sky was dark gray, and the thunder rolled from their home above the sky. Naruto closed his eyes and tilted his face towards the sky, breathing in the ice-cold air as he felt the gentle beating of the rain against his face. Kamikaze appeared next to Naruto, placed his hand on his shoulder. Are you calm now, Naruto? Asked Kamikaze, his voice surprisingly serious for once. Can't you see that Aizen's just trying to get you worked up? Kamikaze's grip on his shoulder tightened as he said this. Naruto opened his eyes and glanced sideways at his Zanpakuto spirit, glaring at him. I know that, Kamikaze. I don't need you to dash. Naruto suddenly stopped talking as he felt something poking his neck. He rolled his eyes down to find the point Kamikaze's blade gently pressing his neck. If you truly want to protect your friends and comrades, then all you need to do is keep your rage under control. You're stronger than him, Naruto, and you're not alone. Naruto's eyes grew wide as Kamikaze said this.
You have me, Kurama, your fellow Shinobigamis, and even the Ryokas that came to save Rukia.
As long as you don't give in to Aizen's attempts to manipulate you, you can succeed.
Kurama, who was trying to rest on the ground behind them, snorted.
Don't mind me, just trying to take a nap over here. Naruto remained silent for a few moments. Kamikaze, you. He looked up and gave his Zanpakuto spirit a huge grin. Despite taunting me all the time, you've always been with me and Kurama to give us a hand, haven't you? I guess that even someone as happy-go-lucky and crazy as you has their moments. Kamikaze sniffed at this. Everyone has to be serious at time, even someone like me. Naruto looked down at the ground and smiled. I guess that I should expect as much from my own Zanpakuto. Back in the real world,
Naruto opened his eyes and stared at the now surprised Aizen, a huge grin on his face. I wonder what happened to him, thought Aizen to himself as he stared at the changed boy.
Minato smiled as he glanced sideways at his son.
I wonder if he and his Zanpakuto managed to have a talk. Naruto looked around and noticed something peculiar.
Wait a second.
That conversation took almost 20 minutes, but it feels like only couple of seconds had passed here.
Well, I'm waiting, Uzumaki-kun, said Aizen.
Naruto raised his sword and got into a fighting position, a serious look on his face. I'll make sure that you don't get into my head again, and I promise you'll never lay a finger on Rukia.
Aizen.
The smile on Aizen's face disappeared. You shouldn't get so full of yourself, he said, his eyes narrowed.
Fear not, Uzumaki-kun.
I will soon show you the error of what you just said. Shisui, who had slowly backed up so that he was almost directly behind Minato, raised his Zanpakuto to his face, his eyes closed. Karasu no Tsuruya, the crow's stare, he whispered quietly, opening his eyes to reveal his Sharingan. So Kayako Hill, Suriitai, Soul Society.
Lieutenant Abari.
Renji stopped and turned around to see Haku and Hiruzen running up to them.
Haku. Hiruzen.
Good to see you're still not tired out, said Hiruzen as glanced over Renji.
Are you hurt anywhere?
Renji grinned.
Not really.
I'm still sore from my battle with Captain Kachiki, but other than that, I'm good to go.
Hiruzen nodded. Very well then. Haku, go ahead and lead the way. I'll stay in the back in case anyone tries to intercept us along the way. Haku nodded and sprung forward.
Let's go, he said as he sped across the plain. Renji and the others followed closely behind. After 20 or so minutes of running, Renji glanced behind at Hiruzen. So, Lieutenant Hiruzen, he started.
What's all of this about?
Hiruzen closed his eyes for a brief second before answering. Sosuke Aizen has betrayed Soul Society, he said bluntly.
Renji and Rukia's eyes widened in shock. What? Exclaimed Renji. Captain Aizen, a traitor? Impossible. Haku shook his head. I'm afraid that it's true.
It seems that he was after a certain item, and apparently it had something to do with your execution, Rukia.
Rukia pointed to herself. Me?
Yes, said Haku. He was aiming for you to be killed so that he could somehow use that to get the item that he wanted.
Renji clenched his teeth. That lousy piece of shit. That scumbag.
That traitor. I'll kill him and all of his subordinates for what they've done. Hiruzen reached out and grabbed his shoulder.
Don't be so hasty, Abari-kun. Aizen Sasuke may be a traitor, but he's still a captain.
Also, remember that you've already fallen victim to his Kyoka Suigetsu, Mirror Flower, Watermoon, and his subordinates are also captains.
Renji blinked. His Kyoka Suigetsu? What do you mean by me having already fallen victim to it?
I thought that his Zanpakuto was dash. Hiruzen shook his head. He's been lying to everyone this whole entire time. His Zanpakuto, Kyoka Suigetsu, has the ability of what you might call complete hypnosis.
Complete hypnosis.
That's right, said Hiruzen. Although I'm not exactly 100% sure on this, anyone who should happen to look upon the Zanpakuto in its Shurkai state falls victim to its complete hypnosis, and there's absolutely no way to free themselves from it. But I should still at least try to dash. And remember that you gave Ichigo your word that you'd protect Rukia with your life, Hiruzen reminded him.
Renji looked down at the ground as he ran. I guess so.
Don't worry, Abari-kun, said Hiruzen with a slightly encouraging smile.
Naruto.
He's been preparing for a showdown with Aizen for quite some time.
We'll be all right.
Rukia stared blankly at the trees they passed by as Rinji ran with her in his arms.
Naruto. Ichigo. Just how far are you two willing to go in order to save a friend?
I feel as if you two were meant to meet each other. I felt as if it was fate, but
I also feel as if you two are too similar for your own goods.
Wait, what?
Renji suddenly looked back at Hiruzen. You mean that there's more than one subordinate? Haku nodded.
Yes, he said.
One is Jin Ikamaru, and the other one is...
Stop, said Haku as he skidded to a halt. Renji looked at him, confused.
What's going on, Haku?
It's him, whispered Haku as he stared ahead at a figure approaching them.
Who?
Asked Renji as he stared at the figure. He could barely make out the long purple hair tied into braids and the clear orange goggles.
Wait a second. Is that Kan-Aim Tozen? I must admit that I'm impressed, said Tozen as he stopped 10 feet in front of the 4 Shinigamis.
You?
Shinobigamis are quite impressive.
I suppose that living in the ninja world has its benefits after all.
Let me ask you this one thing: how was it that only you people were able to anticipate our every move when the others could not?
Hiruzen narrowed his eyes as he glared at Tozen. You'll find out when you stand trial.
We're here to take you in, Kan-Aim Tozen. How foolish.
Tozen concentrated on their ryatsus and measured the distance between the formed shinobis and the 2 shinigamis. He suddenly flash-stepped in between Haku and Hiruzen, raising his hand slightly.
Sentan Hakuja, 1000-coil white snake.
A long white piece of cloth emerged from Tozen's sleeve and wrapped itself around himself and the two that he was after, that is, until...
What?
Tozen's head snapped to the right as he realized that he was about to use the Kido on not just Rinji and Rukia, but Haku and Hiruzen as well. So, they were somehow able to distort my perception of distance and time.
Haku and Hiruzen used Tozen's surprised reaction to swiftly grab his arms, restraining him.
You won't get away from us so easily, said Haku determinedly as the pieces of cloth began to wrap even tighter around them. A bright flash of white light enveloped the area, and it disappeared to reveal the 5 shinigamis, gone.
Central 46 Compound, Suriitii, Soul Society. Aizen and Jin were barely able to dodge the torrent of water that was generated from Naruto's Zanpakuto.
My, how dangerous, said Jin as he flipped over on his hands, pushing himself off of the ground in order to avoid a stream of lighting that threatened to strike him. Aizen drew his Zanpakuto and met Naruto's charge head-on, their Zanpakutos clashing with each other. Uzumaki-kun, you've grown, commented Aizen as he swung his katana at Naruto's head. Naruto ducked as Aizen's Zanpakuto whizzed over his head, thrusting his own forward in an attempt to pierce Aizen's heart. Aizen easily sidestepped it, slapping Naruto's Zanpakuto away with the flat of his blade.
But is it enough?
Naruto placed one knee on the ground and concentrated, his fist gently pressing against the smooth surface of the floor. He jumped into the air and performed a makeshift cartwheel in midair before Aizen could react.
Not quite.
He grunted as he slammed his fist into Aizen's face. Despite being cloaked in Kurama's shroud, Aizen easily shook off the punch, quickly flickering to Naruto's side and slashing at his side. Naruto stepped a couple of feet away from him and glanced at Shisui, who was simply standing there, looking at Aizen with a peculiar look on his face.
I wonder what he's up to.
Minato quickly flickered to Aizen's side and stabbed at him with his kunai, but Aizen quickly saw this coming and met the kunai with his own blade. Minato grinned as he narrowed his eyes. Aizen's eyes widened in shock as Minato stepped behind him.
Aizen looked down and saw a large gash on his left lower torso and blinked. Impressive.
He narrowed his eyes as he glanced back at Minato.
How is this possible?
I activated my Kyoka Suigetsu quite a while ago. He should have been trapped in my complete hypnosis, and yet, he glanced over at Naruto and the others as he tried to figure out what had just happened. I know for a fact that Uzumaki Naruto is able to counter my Kyoka Suigetsu with his Kyuubi's assistance. I am also well aware that the other Shinobigamis know of my Zanpakuto's complete hypnosis, but are unable to counter it, and that Shisui, Fugaku, and Makoto Uchiha can use their Sharingans to cancel out my Kyoka Suigetsu's abilities.
And I've prepared accordingly. So, what could be? Aizen's eyes strayed over to where Shisui was at. Is dash?
Aizen ducked in order to avoid Minato's fast attack, his kunai slicing the tip of Aizen's hair as it passed overhead. You shouldn't assume that you've seen our full powers, Aizen, said Minato as he spun his kunais on the tip of his fingers.
None of us had ever needed to go all out against an opponent, that's all.
Minato quickly threw both of his kunais at Aizen as his eyes widened in shock, one after another. Aizen easily dodged these, but Minato surprised him by swiftly appearing behind him, grabbing the kunais and flickering to Aizen's side. Aizen crouched down and slammed his blade against Minato's kunais. The strength of Aizen's blow forced Minato back a couple of inches, surprising him. But that doesn't mean that Aizen isn't dangerous, thought Minato to himself as he braced himself for another blow. He may be a cruel and a manipulative traitor, but he's still one of the most skilled opponents that I've ever faced.
But then, started Shisui as Naruto and Minato appeared next to him.
It looks like we'll need to go all out in order to defeat you, Aizen. Do not consider yourself worthy of facing us, Aizen, said Minato as Jin walked over to Aizen's side.
Consider it an honor that we consider you dangerous enough to crush with all of our might.
Aizen narrowed his eyes as he stared at his vice-captain.
How arrogant, chuckled Aizen suddenly, surprising the three. You three have yet to see what your opponent can do, and yet you already assume that you can defeat him?
Minato grinned as he, Naruto, and Shisui all rolled up right sleeves, revealing a seal on each of their right forearms that were nearly identical to the ones that were placed on the captain and vice-captains who
entered the human world. Aizen blinked, unwilling to show how surprised he was to the enemies. It can't be. What are those? Naruto sighed and gave him a grin.
Since he saw this battle coming and wanted to have a trump card when we eventually confronted you, my dad had my mom place these seals on myself and the rest of the Shinobigamis before entering the Shino Academy in order to hide our true strengths. Jin slightly frowned at this.
What you trying to say, Naruto-san?
What I'm saying is that the total amount of our powers that were sealed off is around half, said Naruto. Aizen's eyes widened in shock as he said this.
Impossible.
They're Ryatsu's, with the exception Uzumaki Naruto's, which is obviously higher than a captain levels, could already be considered to be on a captain levels, and yet they're claiming to only be using half of their full power. Jin chuckled quietly to himself as he realized what this meant.
Oh well, what can you do, Captain?
We best be getting out of here before this gets even more unpleasant, he said as a long piece of white cloth emerged from his sleeve. It quickly wrapped itself around the two traitors, and they disappeared in a blinding flash of white light. Just before they disappeared, however, Aizen saw a long piece of white cloth emerging from Shisui's sleeve as well. So Kayako Hill, Suriitai, Soul Society, Zabuza, Kushina, Fugaku, and Makoto saw three flashes of white light appear around 10 feet from each other, and the light dissipated to reveal Aizen, Jin, Tozen, Haku, Hiruzen, Renji, Rukia, Naruto, Minato, and Shisui standing there. Fugaku narrowed his eyes as he saw Aizen.
So, it's finally come to this.
As her eyes drifted to Naruto and the others, her eyes widened as she saw their right sleeves rolled up. Naruto, Minato, and Shisui Flash stepped in between Aizen and Renji's group, bracing themselves in case Aizen's group tried to attack.
Hey, Naruto! Yelled Renji.
Naruto glanced back at Renji and quickly turned his gaze back to Aizen and the others.
Yeah, what's up? Renji scowled comically and slapped Naruto in the back of the head. Hey, look at me when I'm talking to you.
Naruto scowled at him and waved his Zanpakuto wildly at him.
Hey! Can't you see that I'm in a bit of a critical situation here?
Where's Ichigo?
Asked Renji, his face serious again.
Last time I checked he was with you, and now he isn't.
Is he alright?
I left him with that Byakuya a while back, said Naruto as he glanced at the direction that Ichigo and Byakuya were in.
I'm sure that he's fine, Renji.
Ichigo would never lose to someone like him. Renji closed his eyes and sighed.
Let's hope.
Naruto turned back to Aizen and the others and took up his position.
Anyway, you and Rukia get out of here, alright?
Renji narrowed his eyes.
Are you kidding me? There's no way that I'm just gonna dash. Hey, tattoo brows.
Renji's eyes widened in shock as Naruto glared at him. There's no way that I'll ever forgive you if Rukia falls into Aizen's hands.
Take her and run right now. You have a promise to keep to Ichigo, remember?
Renji bowed his head.
You better win, Naruto.
Naruto nodded, his eyes still fixed on Aizen.
Yeah, I know. Now get going already.
Renji stared at Naruto and the others one last time before shooting up and speeding across the terrain.
You better make it out of this alive, Naruto.
Tozen stirred as he felt Rinji and Rukia's Ryatsu growing further and further away.
Shall I go and chase them down, Aizen-sama? Aizen smiled. No, can aim. It's quite alright.
We can track down those two on our own pace later, but taking care of these former shinobis is our main priority as of now.
Naruto smirked when he heard this.
Well, good luck on that, Aizen, he said in a mocking tone. Naruto and the other Shinobigamis placed their left hands on their respective seals, and as their power limiters began to glow, Naruto and the other former shinobis looked up at Aizen and his two subordinates, their eyes glowing as an overwhelming amount of Ryatsu began to flow from within them.
Kai. Chapter 7, The Forestalled Ambition Part 3.
So Kayako Hill, Suriitai, Soul Society.
Ichigo slammed the point of sword into the ground and clenched his teeth.
Byakuya, who was just a few away from him, stumbled forward as he tried not to black out. He looked at his bloodied hand and clenched it into a tight fist.
So, you wanted to know why I was okay with killing Rukia?
Ichigo turned around and faced him as he heard this.
Those who have sinned must be judged, continued Byakuya. Once the sentence is decided it's final since it is the law.
So, because it's the law, you'd even kill your own sister?
Asked Ichigo.
Affection for relatives, how ridiculous.
Ichigo's eyes widened. What? Against the wall, any emotion is meaningless. I never had any of those emotions to begin with.
The Kuchiki clan is one of the great four noble houses, and we must be an example for all Shinigamis.
If we do not obey the law, then who will? Ichigo spat out a mouthful of blood.
Sorry, but I don't understand.
If I were you, I would have still gone against the law. Byakuya looked shocked. I see.
So, his enemy all this time was in fact Soul Society, not me.
Ichigo Kurosaki, said Byakuya out loud.
My sword has been broken by your free-spiritedness.
This duel is Y-. Byakuya stopped as he felt a large group of Shinigamis approaching.
Ichigo's eyes widened in shock as he saw Naruto, Minato, Shisui, Zabuza, Haku, Hiruzen, Kushina, Fugaku, Makoto, Rinji, Rukia, Aizen, Jin, and Tozen appear around 100 feet from where he and Byakuya was. Ichigo scowled as he fell down on the ground.
And Naruto? And Rinji and Rukia as well? Just what the hell is he doing?
I told that bastard to protect Rukia and he just dash.
It seems that they've arrived, said Byakuya softly.
Hey, Byakuya.
Are Naruto and those other guys going up against Aizen and his subordinates?
Asked Ichigo, glancing at him for a split second before turning his gaze back to Naruto and the others.
You are correct, answered Byakuya in his usual cool manner. Despite the situation, Ichigo couldn't help but be annoyed by that as he glared comically at Byakuya. Yamamoto had already been informed of Aizen's treachery by Toshiro and had asked Kairaku to inform everyone in Suriitai by using Tendikura, heavenly rickshaws in Silken Air, just a few moments before their fight had ended. Byakuya glanced at Ichigo as he saw him struggle to get up. Where do you think you're going, Ichigo Kurosaki? Ichigo looked up at him as he got to his feet. I'm going to help Naruto kick that traitor's ass, of course. He answered as he frowned at Byakuya. There is no need for that, said Byakuya, surprising Ichigo. Remember why you came here in the first place, Ichigo Kurosaki. Ichigo looked down as Byakuya said this.
Well yeah, but Uzumaki Naruto is more than capable of handling Aizen, stated Byakuya despite himself. He is one of the strongest members of the Gotii 13, and he and the other former shinobi are more than capable of defeating the traitor.
If you doubt my words, then stay and see what I mean. Meanwhile, Kai.
Tozen's eyes widened in shock as he felt an enormous burst of Ryatsu coming from the Shinobigamis.
What is this? The former shinobi's Ryatsus have doubled? How is this even possible? At this rate, Tozen turned to look at Aizen. Aizen-sama, what dash?
Tozen's head snapped around as he felt Kushina extended her hand out towards them. 10 pink bolts of energy materialized around Kushina and sped towards the three traitors. Aizen and his two subordinates quickly dodged the attack by using Flash Step, barely avoiding the devastating explosion that followed. Aizen narrowed his eyes and grinned as he saw this. To use Heido 91, Senjukoten Taiho, Thousand Hand Bright Heaven Culling Spear, without calling out its name or reciting the incantation at full power.
Kido had always been Kushina Uzumaki's strong point. But then,
Again, for the most proficient Kido master to have ever been produced in all of Soul Society, a task such as this is trivial. Jin looked down at his singed left arm and looked at Aizen. It seems that 5th Division's Sanseki-san's attacks gotten even stronger. If they got any more surprises up their sleeves, I'm afraid that we're gonna have to retreat, Captain Aizen. Aizen glanced at his subordinate. It seems like it. Aizen suddenly blinked and smiled unexpectedly. Well, if it isn't 11 ND Division's 4th seat Zabuza, 2 ND Division's Lieutenant Yuki, and 8th Division's Lieutenant Sarutobi. How good of you to come and finally join us. Zabuza stared at Jin as he slowly drew his Zanpakuto. You're not getting away this time, Ikemaru. You're going to pay for pulling that prank on me last year. My, grinned Jin. If it isn't 11th Division's 4th seated officer, Zabuza Momochi. So scary, even more so than your captain. You're strong enough to defeat your captain, but unlike him, you ain't afraid to use your full powers if necessary. Ha! Your sarcastic flattery won't save you from me, Ikemaru. Slaughter, Shikohito, executioner! Yelled Zabuza. Zabuza's Zanpakuto began to glow and expand until it became what closely resembled an oversized butcher knife, but the only difference was that this one had a large hole toward the front of the blade. Shikohito was pale gray, and it had a bloodstain in the front of it. The large hole towards the front seemed to be surrounded by a condensed sphere of mist which seemed neither solid nor liquid. Zabuza held the blade in front of him, the point extended towards Jin. Get ready, Ikemaru. Oh, how scary, faked Jin, holding his hands up in mock defeat. Your blade is fitting considering the fact that you've lived your whole entire life nicknamed as the Demon of the Hidden Mist. Anyone who's laid eyes on it have been terrified cause of its unique powers. I better be careful. Zabuza bowed his head, chuckling quietly to himself. The only non-shinobi Shinigami that's been able to survive my Shikohito in a fight was my captain, Zaraki Kenpachi, and that's only because I spared him out of my respect for him. Jin chuckled at this. Oh, one question, said Zabuza. Jin looked up at Zabuza. Zabuza flipped his sword over and showed the flat of his blade to Jin, and the sphere started to slowly leak out a thin wave of mist. Would you rather I leave enough of you to bury, or would you rather be cremated? Hato 73, Soren Sokatsui, Twin Lotus Bluefire, crashed down. Makoto called out. Tozen quickly dodged two bursts of Ryatsu before they could hit him, quickly weaving to the left and right in order to avoid the Ankens that Makoto had quickly thrown at him right after. Her Ankens are coated with a deadly poison, huh? If I'm not careful, I'll be dead within minutes. It'll be a pain to avoid all of them though. Tozen raised his Zanpakuto and skillfully deflected a couple of the Ankens, ducking as he dodged another. As he backed away from the Ankens, his head snapped to the side as he felt Kushina's presence behind him. Shit! Said Tozen to himself as he quickly stabbed his katana into the sword. He swiftly retaliated by swinging his leg at her, but Kushina easily blocked the kick and sent a barrage of kicks and punches at Tozen. The former captain grimaced as he felt Kushina's fist pass dangerously close to his head. If I remember correctly, Uzumaki Kushina rarely used her Zanpakuto during battle, mainly relying on her Kido and Hakuta skills instead. He swiftly slapped aside a punch and kicked at Kushina's stomach. Ah! Cried Kushina as she went stumbling back a couple of feet. Ha! Just kidding. Tozen's eyes widened in shock as Kushina appeared behind him. He quickly ducked as her Zanpakuto swung over his head. But then again, not as rarely as Uchiha Shursui. Kushina sheathed her Zanpakuto and smiled. Tozen's head snapped to the right as he realized that Kushina had been distracting him so that he wouldn't notice Fugaku slowly sneaking up on him. Tozen grimaced as he grabbed his right arm, suddenly realizing that Fugaku had swiftly slashed him in multiple places. Damn it! My right arm is useless. Tozen's hand automatically dropped his Zanpakuto, and he quickly grabbed it with his left hand, sheathing it. I see. Now I can't wield my Zanpakuto. Tozen bent his body backwards, dodging a horizontal slash from Fugaku. Tell me, Fugaku, began Tozen as he sent Fugaku skidding back a couple of feet with a kick to the chest. Why is it that you are fighting me when you have no fear emanating from your blade? Shay! Fugaku quickly retaliated by speeding towards his captain and slashing his sword up at him, aiming to slice his captain's face from the chin up. I've never cared for your ideals, Tozen. Tozen's eyes narrowed. What? I admit that there was a time when I believed in something similar to what you believe in now, admitted Fugaku as he rested the blade on his katana on his shoulders.
But then what? Inquired Tozen.
But then, those ideals, coupled with my clan's hatred, were the very things that caused the destruction of my clan.
Stated Fugaku, surprising him.
It only caused pain and misery to my own 2 sons, the only 2 survivors of my clan.
Go on,
said Tozen, suddenly interested.
And then, in my time in Soul Society,
I learned that fear is unnecessary in battle as it only brings lack of resolve, a cowardly sense of self-preservation and, ultimately, the deaths of the people that you wish to protect before your own inevitable demise.
What did you say?
Tozen clenched his teeth in anger as he tightened his left hand into a fist. Without fear, there is no sense of justice. The only thing that one needs in battle is to be at peace with oneself, the acceptance of their own mortality, and the determination to do what your own heart feels is right, and my heart is saying to stop Aizen and anyone who takes side with him, you, Tozen. Tozen grabbed the hilt of his Zanpakuto with his left hand and slowly drew it from its sheath.
You? Those who pervert the balance of justice must be eliminated no matter what. You have no fear, Fugaku?
That is understandable, but you have reached your limit. You 3 will ultimately fail, Tozen, stated Fugaku as he pointed the point of his sword at Tozen's heart.
Would you like to know why?
It's because, unlike you, the other Shinobigamis and I aren't afraid to die if that's what it takes to stop you. If that's the price that we have to pay, then so be it. In order to save Soul Society and what we believe, we're willing to give up our lives.
Tozen's eyes widened at this. Such strong resolve. This is the end, Tozen,
roared Fugaku as he charged at him.
Meanwhile,
Renji, who was still carrying Rukia in his arms, skid to a halt as he saw a group of figures approaching from a distance.
Is that?
Renji squinted as he tried to make out who they were.
Ranji-san. Rukia-san. Oh, it's Orohime and the others,
exclaimed Rukia as she waved at the group. Inoue, who was with Yuichiro, Ishida, Chad, Ganju, and Makizo Aramaki stopped in front of Renji and Rukia, having decided to continue on to Sokayako Hill after Zabuza had failed to return.
Are any of you hurt? Asked Rukia as she looked over Inoue. Inoue shook her head.
No, we're all fine. Rukia's eyes widened in shock as she felt herself fall through the air. She quickly landed safely on the ground, but Renji collapsed on the ground from exhaustion.
Ranji-san.
Inoue quickly knelt by him.
He's out cold. Oh no, Rukia sighed. It's probably from his battle with Nisama and carrying me around all of this time. It's my fault, Ganju grunted as he grabbed Renji and hoisted him on his shoulder.
There we go, said Ganju.
We're all ready to go.
Chad suddenly grabbed a wobbly Rukia before she could complain and carried her in his arms.
See Chad.
Rukia looked embarrassed by the fact that she had to be carried all of the time.
Okay. Chad glanced at the others before nodding. Let's move. Wait. Makizo cried out. We should probably head back now that we've got Rukia-san with us. Who's with me? Litsuku.
He yelled as he turned around and started marching away.
Hey! 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 Ganju grabbed Makizo by the back of his uniform and kicked him in the butt. Don't you even think about it, Chobihige-san. Agreed Yuichiro. That's right, Maki. We can't go back now. Makizo pouted. But.
Ishida pointed to Sokayako Hill. If you haven't forgotten, Ichigo's still up there, and that Aizen guy might be too.
Makizo's eyes widened.
He opened his mouth to say something, but nothing came out. If what we heard about that Aizen guy is true, then Ichigo might be in serious trouble, said Ishida as he clenched his teeth in anger.
How could you dash?
Ishida stopped talking as he and the others felt an overwhelming amount of Ryatsu coming from Sokayako Hill. Chad, who looked shocked by this, started to tremble.
Whose Ryatsu is that?
He asked no one in particular.
It's obviously not Ichigo's, but,
as the group continued to stare at Sokayako Hill, they unconsciously stepped backwards as they saw a massive storm cloud in the shape of a hurricane beginning to form. The storm cloud began to spread all throughout Siriidii, grabbing everyone's attention as they stared up at the sky.
Rukia-san, what's going on? asked Inoue, a frightened look on her face. Rukia's eyes widened in shock as she began to realize what was going on. She blinked and turned to Inoue and the others, suddenly calm. This can only mean one thing, she said. Inoue and the others looked confused. What does it mean? Asked Ishida. It means that Naruto Uzumaki.
Everyone's head, excluding Rukia's, snapped towards Sokayaku Hill as they heard a sound similar to a dragon's roar in the distance from inside of the storm clouds. Has achieved Bankai. Chapter 8, The Forestalled Ambition, Conclusion. Sokayaku Hill, Suriitai, Soul Society. Minato tilted his head to the side, easily dodging a thrust attack from his former captain. He flipped over on his hands and kicked the flat of Aizen's blade with impressive force that forced Aizen back a few feet. Aizen slashed at his arms, and Minato quickly reacted by pushing himself off of the ground using his arms and flipping over so that he landed on his feet. Aizen kept his cool as he studied the movements of his former vice-captain. Impressive. The Shinobigami have to upper hand as of now. If we keep on like this, then... Aizen's eyes locked onto Shirsui's as he glanced at him and Naruto, and his eyes narrowed as he saw Shirsui smile.
So, Aizen, began Shirsui. How does it feel to finally be on the verge of defeat?
Aizen simply shook off the comment and responded to it with a question of his own.
Shirsui Uchiha. It's quite obvious that you are not standing there just for show, so tell me this. What have you done to me? Shirsui smirked slightly at this.
Aizen, he said slowly. As my enemy, it would be almost suicidal for me to reveal the secrets behind my abilities, but...
Aizen raised an eyebrow. But, I will say that your Zanpakuto isn't the only one that can manipulate others.
Now, Shirsui's Zanpakuto, Karasu no Hansha, had three main abilities. The first one was Karasu no Tsutia, the crow's stare, which is activated by Shirsui himself, and everything within the blade and Shirsui's sight falls into an illusion similar to Kyoka Suigetsu's complete hypnosis, but Shirsui could also manipulate his opponent's perception of space and time. This ability could also be further enhanced with his Sharingan. The second ability, Shin no Hansha, the true reflection, activates on its own accords at the moment of the Shurikai's release, and it protected Shirsui's mind from all foreign entities and all forms of manipulation, including Kyoka Suigetsu's complete hypnosis. The third ability, Mure, Flock, allows Shirsui to extend his Shin no Hansha ability to others around him whenever he wanted to, but the downside to this ability was that he could not use his Zanpakuto to enhance the reach of his Karasu no Tsutia while Mure was activated. Aizen's eyes widened in shock.
So, he's placed an illusion on me?
To have placed an illusion on me that's even more powerful than my own. Aizen clenched his teeth and unexpectedly rushed towards the wounded Byakuya that was lying on the ground, his sword raised for the kill.
Farewell, Byakuya Kuchiki.
What? Aizen looked shocked as his attack was suddenly blocked by Naruto, who was looking at him with a very angry look on his face.
Aizen, you coward!
Spat Naruto as he pushed Aizen back an inch, their blades scraping against each other. You must have no shame if you're willing to attack an unarmed person who can barely stand. Byakuya stared at Naruto with a look on his face despite being shocked by Naruto's actions.
Lieutenant Uzumaki. Naruto glanced back at him.
What is it? Why are you protecting me when you despise me so?
Asked Byakuya calmly.
Naruto ducked and avoided Aizen's blade, countering the move by swinging his own sword at him. It's just something that I learned from my sensei back in the shinobi world. Naruto took a deep breath as he stared at Byakuya. Those who break the rules are scum, but those who abandon their friends are worse than scum. I may see you as someone who's worse than a scum, but you're still a comrade, and more importantly, you're Rukia's older brother. So as far as I'm concerned, I can't, and I won't let Aizen kill you even if I can't stand you.
Byakuya's looked shocked. Naruto Uzumaki. He's the same as Ichigo Kurosaki.
Our confrontations over the past several days were truly an attempt to save Rukia's life, and he was only following his own heart from the start.
Byakuya snapped out of his thoughts as Naruto pushed Aizen back several yards with brute force.
Naruto! Naruto turned around to see his dad and Shirsui appear beside him.
Dad!
Shirsui-sensei, get everyone else to stand back, said Naruto quietly, his head bowed.
I'm going to finish this battle once and for all. Ichigo looked angry at this.
What? Naruto, I know that Byakuya and I might be in a bad state right now, but we can still help you guys fight Aizen. I know that, stated Naruto as he glanced over at him.
But I'm not worried about Aizen hurting you too. Ichigo's eyes widened. What do you mean? Naruto looked up at Aizen with a serious look on his face.
I'm afraid that I don't have enough control over what I'm about to do now, so you guys might get caught in the crossfire.
What do you mean by that, Naruto Uzumaki? Asked Byakuya calmly.
Minato quickly caught on to what his son was saying and looked hard at him.
Naruto, he said quietly. Have you really achieved Bankai? Naruto nodded in response.
I'm sorry for disobeying your orders as you told me not to obtain it yet, but I dash.
It's alright, replied Minato. You don't have to say anything. I already knew that you would go ahead and do it without my permission,
but I'm just glad that you waited as long as you did before going on with your Bankai training.
Just be careful, son. Minato quickly grabbed Ichigo by his Shihakusho and disappeared. Shisui and Byakuya quickly followed suit.
Naruto turned to Aizen and deactivated Kurama's shroud, causing Aizen to look surprised.
Why did you do that? Asked Aizen curiously.
I'll activate it again after I activate my newest trump card, he replied.
Don't worry about it.
Aizen's eyes widened as he realized what Naruto meant and jumped forward to stop him, but it was too late. Naruto released a monstrous level of Ryatsu that surprised Aizen and overwhelmed him, and he stared at Aizen with a determined look in his eyes.
It's time to end this battle, Aizen. Roared Naruto. He pointed his blade into the air, the tip of the katana gleaming against the sun. Bankai.
Minato and the others, including Aizen, looked up at the sky as they saw the sky beginning to darken. Giant storm clouds started to form over Naruto's head, and the storm clouds slowly began to spread throughout Siriatii, causing everyone to look up at the sky, wondering what was going on. A loud roar echoed above the cloud before a massive column of water, wind, and lightning fell from the storm above. Everyone looked on in amazement as the massive column of elements channeled itself through Naruto's Zanpakuto, eventually expanding to encase him until he could not be seen from the outside. After a few seconds the column created by Naruto's Bankai dissipated while the giant storm clouds overhead organizing themselves to form a massive maelstrom.
Kamikaze no Mi, Eye of the Divine Wind. Naruto yelled out as he emerged from the dispersed column, revealing himself to Aizen.
Naruto was cloaked in armor similar to the one that the spirit of Kamikaze wore, made purely of lightning along with a shortened shakuto that was connected to the armor with an extendable rope made of pure lightning. On the back of the armor was the Uzumaki clan crest made out of black lightning. Naruto stared hard at Aizen, his gaze even more serious than before. I hope that you're ready, Aizen, because you're about to die on this hill.
Aizen-sama.
Aizen glanced to the left and right as Jin and Tozen appeared next to him. Jin observed Naruto's new form, his seemingly permanent grin growing even wider.
My, how scary, he said jokingly. And I thought that you were scary enough without your Bankai. Naruto smirked at this.
I've had just about enough of your sarcasm, you sack of shit, he said. I'm really going to enjoy putting some real fear into you. Jin opened his to question this, but he stopped as he saw Naruto beginning to channel his Ryatsu through his blade. Naruto pointed the tip of the blade at Aizen and his two subordinates.
Idai Genso Ikari, Great Elemental Fury.
Aizen and his two subordinates' eyes widened in surprise as a wide beam of what seemed like water, wind, and lightning shot out of the tip of Naruto's Zanpakuto.
So fast,
thought Tozen as he readied himself.
Boom!
Aizen and the two others were barely able to dodge the attack as it completely devastated a good portion of the area. Even though they were able to dodge the attack, they were blown back several meters back due to the intense shockwave that was generated by the attack. Aizen narrowed his eyes as he went flying through the air.
Quite an attack. Uzumaki's Zanpakuto had always been able to manipulate wind, lightning, and water, but the ability to manipulate all three elements at once is a new one. If he has any more tricks up his sleeves, then I will be forced to retreat without the Hogyoku.
Naruto reactivated Kurama's shroud right after he sent Aizen and the others flying, grabbing his tethered blade and throwing it at Aizen repeatedly.
Ichigo's eyes widened as he saw this. This is just like what my inner hollow did when he fought me.
Naruto silently activated his ability Hyoka, marks, while he quickly threw his Chikuto at Aizen and his subordinates rapidly. This ability allowed him to imprint a kanji for Kaze, wind, Raime, thunder, and Ormizu, water, on whoever/whatever he hit with the blade. He could imprint up to 3 marks for each kanji at a time. By the time Aizen and the others had regained their footing, Naruto had managed to mark each of them twice. Naruto stopped throwing the blade and looked up at the sky, surprising Aizen and the others. "Why stop attacking us, Naruto-kun?" asked Aizen curiously. Naruto sighed and turned his gaze to Aizen. "You should be more patient, Aizen. You're just about to get your answer." Naruto looked back up at the sky and raised his blade, pointing it at the sky. A wide beam of water, wind, and lightning shot out from the tip of the blade, speeding towards the maelstrom that lied above Naruto. "Erasure no Sirii, spirits of the storm." The ground seemed to tremble as the sound of multiple dragons roaring shook the very air itself. Ichigo, who was watching the entire fight alone with Byakuya and the other Shinobigamis, was utterly amazed and bewildered by what was happening right in front of him. "Just what's going on here?" he whispered. At that point, Renji, Rukia, the rest of Ichigo's friends, as well as Yuichiro, Makizo, and Hanataro, who met up with the group on their way to Sokayaku Hill, came running into view from the distant, skidding to a halt when they reached Ichigo and the others. Minato narrowed his eyes upon seeing the group, especially Oraheim, Yurio, Chad, Ganju, and Hanataro. So those are the other intruders. To that 4 humans and 1 Rukangai resident were willing and able to go this far just to save a friend and were even able to convince Hanataro to help them. Minato then smiled at the idea. "I can see why Naruto took an interest in them. It sounds like something my son would have done himself," he thought as he turned his attention back to the fight. Ichigo looked surprised when he saw them. What are you guys doing here?" he asked. Ishida looked annoyed by this question. "What are we doing here?" "We're here to get you out of here, obviously, Kurosaki." "I never asked for you to," replied Ichigo with a comical look on his face. Ishida scowled as he stepped forward. "What? You dash." "I said that I didn't dash." Ishida suddenly turned around as he noticed Aizen and the others fighting a blonde-haired figure. "Hey, Kurosaki. Are those 3 who I think they are?" Ichigo nodded, suddenly serious. "Yeah. Ishida. If you're thinking that they're the ones responsible for what happened to Rukia, then they are." Inoue, who was standing next to Ishida and Chad, blinked as she spotted the blonde Shinigami. "Hey, who is that person that's fighting those 3? she asked, looking over at Renji. "That's Naruto Uzumaki," said Renji weakly. Oraheim, Chad, and Ishida looked shocked. Chad looked down at Rukia. "Kuchiki-san. Who exactly is this Naruto anyways?" Rukia sighed as she looked at her vice-captain. 13th Division Lieutenant, Naruto. "He's my vice-captain, as well as one of the strongest members of the Gotii 13. He's also a close friend of mine, and he's also a former shinobi." Ishida looked confused. "A shinobi? What does that dash?" He was suddenly interrupted by a terrified Hanataro pointing at the giant maelstrom above. The maelstrom is getting even bigger," he squeaked. Everyone looked up at the direction that Hanataro was looking in and saw that the storm was growing. It had now already grown over 5 times in size in the past couple of seconds, and it now reached as far as the 4th districts in all of the 4 regions of the Rukangai area. "Oi, look up there!" yelled Ganju suddenly. "There's something coming out of the sky." The group then turned their gazes at the sky directly above Naruto just as 3 large openings in the storm clouds formed above him. At that moment, the areas that had been engulfed by the maelstrom were suddenly beset and drenched by heavy rain and wind. Naruto glanced up at the sky and then turned his gaze to Aizen and his subordinates. "Erasure no Sirii is my Bankai's most powerful ability, however, it also uses up so much of my Ryuryoku that if I don't deactivate it in time my Bankai will forcibly deactivate itself, after which point, I won't be able to use it until that lost Ryuryoku is restored after 5 days." Naruto explained. Ost. Fade to black. From Bleach, link, www.youtube.com. Watch V equals WSBV7CJZLKS. Remember to include the backspaces and slashes. It's a big gamble for me to use this attack. Naruto stopped just in time as the sound of the roaring dragons returned. This time, however, the roars continued to grow louder and louder until the source of the roars finally emerged from the 3 openings in the storm clouds in the form of 3 massive dragons that all had glowing red silt pupils. One was composed of water, while the other 2 were composed of wind and lightning, respectively. Everyone on the hill stared at the magnificent beasts in shock. Ishida's eyes widened as he saw them.
Just what the hell are those tea things?
He said quietly to no one in particular. Aizen looked surprised and stared at them with wide eyes.
This is,
as I was saying, said Naruto, catching Aizen's attention.
Despite the dangers of using the Yarisher no Sirai, its sheer power makes it worth taking the risk, as you're about to see.
The lightning from Naruto's blade and tether suddenly dissipated, and the lightning from the two objects reappeared around Naruto's hands, which he used to create the dragon seal.
His hands now looked like they were encased in two lightning gauntlets. Howl, Kaze no Sirai, Wine Spirit.
Aizen and the other two's eyes widened in shock as the wind dragon suddenly flew at them like a bullet, the three barely being able to dodge it. Unfortunately for Aizen and his cohorts though, Aizen was marked with the Kaze Hyoka, so the dragon simply swerved and sped towards them once more.
Not so fast! Cried Naruto as he saw them dodge. Crash, Mizu no Sirai, Water Spirit.
The water dragon, to the trio's surprise, joined in the assault and sped towards the three. They were barely able to dodge both of the dragons as they crashed into the ground next to them.
It was much more difficult to dodge, however, as Jin and Tozen were both marked with the Mizu Hyoka that were now glowing as well.
The three were now trapped between the two dragons, and as the beasts charged at them, Naruto narrowed his eyes.
You guys won't be escaping again. Roar, Raime no Sirai, Thunder Spirit.
As he said this, the dragon made out of lightning attacked Aizen and the others from above. Between the three of them, they managed to hit the three with a pincer attack, and as the result of the attack,
the collision of the three dragons created a massive shockwave that destroyed part of the Sokayaku hill that the broken scaffold was on, causing it to collapse and fall to the ground below.
As the blast subsided, Naruto deactivated Yarisher no Sirai and reverted back to his Shurikai, causing the sword to reappear on his right hand. The storm slowly subsided, causing the maelstrom to disappear. Naruto grimaced slightly as he gripped his sword tightly with his hand.
If I had taken another minute to finish this battle, then I would have lost my Bankai for 5 days.
Naruto turned his attention to Aizen and the others, who had been critically injured as a result of the attack. It was quite obvious that they were no longer able to fight as a result. Naruto pointed his sword at Aizen, who had been so badly injured that Jin had to prop him up on his shoulder.
The fight's over, Aizen.
You've lost. At that moment, Ichigo, his friends, as well as the other Shinobigamis and Shinigamis, suddenly appeared and rushed over to where Naruto and the others were.
End OST.
Aizen, to Naruto's surprise, chuckled lightly despite his grievous injuries. Naruto narrowed his eyes as he got into his fighting stance.
You might have won the battle, but this war is far from over.
Naruto opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, Aizen and his cohorts were enveloped in a large square beam.
Naruto, realizing that they were about to escape, got ready to attack them. Do not attack, said a voice behind him. Naruto stopped and looked behind him to see the Captain Commander there.
He also saw that Yukitake, along with Suifong, Unohana, Shunsui, Hitsugaya, Ranjaku, and Yoruchi had arrived with the rest of the group.
Captain Commander! Exclaimed Naruto. This is called negation, counter-membrane, explained the Captain Commander.
It's something that Minos used to rescue some of their own. Naruto turned to look at the Jillian's dash, and anyone who's fought against a Minos knows that once the light descended on Aizen,
we could no longer touch him. Naruto sighed at this. The Captain Commander looked at Aizen, then Naruto. You still fought well, Uzumaki Fukutechu.
Thanks to you and the other former shinobi's valiant efforts, you all have managed to stop Aizen from achieving his goals and an injustice that would have put Soul Society in grave danger.
This dash.
The Captain Commander looked up at Aizen as he heard a light chuckle coming from him.
How arrogant of you to assume that, Genryusai Yamamoto, said Aizen.
Uzumaki-kun and the other shinobi have only managed to slow down my plans, and I will eventually succeed in my plans.
To everyone's surprise except for the other Shinobigami, of course, Naruto flashed Aizen a goofy grin.
I don't think so, Aizen, said Naruto surprisingly as he reached into his shihakusho and pulled something out of it. I don't think that you'll get very far without this.
What?
Whispered Aizen. He stared at the item in Naruto's hand in disbelief, unable to comprehend what it was at first. The item was a small, translucent and lavender object that closely resembled a marble. Aizen, who couldn't believe this, clenched his hands into a fist.
Is that the Hogyoku?
He asked aloud, his voice calm despite the situation.
Oh, so that's the name of this thing? Asked Naruto in a mocking voice.
There's no way that you could have known about the Hogyoku, hissed Aizen as he glared at Naruto.
Especially after your actions from our initial confrontation at the Central 46 compound, there's no way.
Naruto chuckled lightly, and then to Aizen and the other Shinigami's surprise, burst into a full-blown laughter.
I was only pretending to act like I didn't know what you were after, laughed Naruto. I was only angry over you calling Rukia a pawn. Naruto ceased laughing as he grinned at Aizen. Did you really think that the other shinobi and I didn't know what you were after, Aizen-chan? You see, when Rukia first came back from the world of the living, I learned about the Hogyoku being sealed within her because Kurama had sensed a second set of emotions within her.
Get it? Aizen narrowed his eyes as he heard this.
Who thought that it was a good idea to give that blasted Kyuubi the ability to sense negative emotions?
Anyway, said Naruto.
After that, I made a deal with Mayuri Taishu to get the Hogyoku out of Rukia while she had been asleep in the cell at the 6th Division's barracks under my watch in exchange for a certain favor. Naruto shuddered at this. But then, I did lie to the captain about the true nature of the item, and I've kept the Hogyoku on me since that time.
Aizen, realizing that he had been outsmarted by Naruto of all people, clenched his teeth in rage as his eyes grew wide, blazing with anger.
You little bastard! He said as he arrived at the top of the negation. I will make you pay for this insult in time, Naruto Uzumaki.
You can try to attack Soul Society as much as you want to, but if you could outsmart by an idiot like me, then I'm pretty sure that we have nothing to worry about, replied Naruto smugly.
Aizen smiled unexpectedly at this. We shall see about that.
A second later, he vanished into the Garaganta along with Jin, Tozen, and the other Minos.
After this, Naruto walked over to the Captain Commander and handed him the Hogyoku.
I think that it would be best if I gave this to you, Head Captain, said Naruto as Yamamoto took the object from his hand. I will make sure that the Hogyoku is hid well so that Aizen will never be able to find it, stated the Captain Commander.
Lieutenant Uzumaki, you fought well, and I thank you.
Naruto opened his mouth to respond with it was no big deal, but instead, he collapsed on the ground much to everyone's shock. Minato and Kushina immediately rushed over to their son's side, and Kushina laid her hands over Naruto and started to heal him.
Is he okay, Kushina? Asked Minato with a worried look on his face. Kushina simply turned to Minato and gave him a smile.
Yes, she replied, unable to hide the relief from her voice. Oraheim, who was watching this, turned to Rukia.
Say, Kachiki-san. Rukia turned to Oraheim. What is it, Inoue? Who are those two people that are with Naruto-kun? She asked. Rukia turned her gaze to the three and smiled.
They're Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki, the vice-captain and the third seat of the 5th Division, and they're also Naruto's parents.
Inoue and the other Ryokas looked surprised by this.
Naruto, who had managed to stay awake, blinked and looked around the devastated area.
Hey, Ichigo. I think that I might have overdone it a bit.
Ichigo looked at the area where the Sokayaku stand used to be, and he turned to Naruto, a comical scowl on his face.
You think? That's it for this reading.
Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction.
Looking forward to having you on board again.